Hey, how's it going?
How you doing, man?
I'm all right.
Brandon. What's going on, Brandon?
What's up, guys?
How are you?
Oh, I'm great, man.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a while. Things have been hectic. Things have been good. How you doing?
Good. Yeah, it's a good change from the last two times we spoke. I was, going over past episodes, obviously, but the last two times I asked you when you came on, like, how's it going? Your answer was bad both times because you either had COVID or I think it was COVID both times, actually. But yeah, good to hear that you're doing good.
Yeah. Now I don't have COVID, but everyone else that I know has COVID.
Dude, it's ridiculous, right?
Well, I don't really pay attention to a lot of the like national or international aspects of it, but I pay attention to the local numbers very closely.
Yeah.
And I remember when everyone freaked out because it was like 300 cases a day, and we're like, we have to do something, blah, blah. And now everyone's business as usual when we're getting like 4,000 and 5,000 cases a day in my county.
Yeah.
So, that rules. Like 14,000 cases in a week, no big deal. Go to work.
It really is insane, just the lack of response locally, federally, all over.
It's like, oh, you got COVID? Well, if you can find the time, take the afternoon off.
Maybe.
If you have the PTO.
I said if you can find the time.
Well, hey, Zach, I was just looking at this. The new law in Colorado is they have to give you, I think, up to 80 hours of PTO for being sick with COVID, no matter what your job is or whatever. In Colorado, at least.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, then Colorado gives more of a fuck than the CDC.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, last I was hearing, they were like, well, if you don't have symptoms, even if you're positive, just come on in. It's fine.
Right.
Oof.
So that's good news, I guess. That's what they're continuing to do.
I mean, it seems like both administrations, the plan is internally to just get everyone infected and let the numbers of deaths be what they are. And the Trump administration, I think, was a little more outspoken about that. But then it was like sort of towards the end of his administration that it was revealed, like the internal documents said that exactly was the plan. Like whatever they were saying outwardly, whatever they were releasing to the press or whatever, that was the plan, was just herd immunity. And that everything else was just like half measures kind of intentionally. And then I think that it seems like the Biden administration is just on track to do the exact same thing. And then this Omicron variant, where they say it's less severe, and kind of use that as an excuse to say, look, let's just fucking deal with it. Like, let's let everybody get it, get to herd immunity and sacrifice whoever we are, because that's going to be fewer people. And of course, it's just a very ableist thing. And I just saw this morning the new video recording of, it was like a Biden medical staffer on his team of some kind, who was just saying on CNBC or CNN or whatever outlet she's on, she's doing one of the panel interviews. And she's saying, like, it's great that the people who are dying now, like 75% or more, are people who have 4 comorbidities or more. So these are people who were just not well to begin with, which is just like outright eugenics. You're just saying eugenics on TV in front of everybody, and that's the policy of the U.S. at this point. So that's where we're at, you guys. Cool.
Fun stuff.
Also, the herd immunity thing would be more the interesting thing about that to me is just that that's clearly not a thing. Like, I have several friends who are on their second, third, or I think somebody I know is on their 4th round of COVID.
Yeah.
So explain to me, like, what immunity they have fucking developed, because you don't get the fucking flu that often. Like, since that's... Oh, I was also reading about how now, like, because everybody's just back in the war... Like, remember, the flu really didn't hit hard last season because everybody was taking COVID precautions. Now nobody gives a fuck about anything anymore. So people are catching COVID and the flu simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But even beyond that, like, okay, I do understand that there are a lot of illnesses that if you have multiple comorbidities are going to be an issue. There are not, like, the other thing is that, like, in Pennsylvania, the hospitals are pretty much full. Like, FEMA is having to send in emergency response teams to Pennsylvania because we have fucked up so hard. We have just shit the bed so badly. Like, it actually is warranting a federal response. But, like, I keep reading about more and more people dying of really treatable, ordinary things. Like, I was reading the story 2 days ago where a woman took her fucking kid to the hospital because he was having abdominal pains. And it took them so long to treat him that his appendix burst in the waiting room. So it went from, like, a really simple, like, not simple in the realm of surgery procedure to a big fucking deal because there simply weren't any medical resources available for this kid.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I almost wonder what the real death toll for COVID is going to be once they actually do figure out like all the people who died of treatable things in the hospital waiting. I'm sure it's going to be double whatever they think it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even last year when New York was getting like absolutely devastated by its first wave, I knew a lot of people like at my old job and shit who were just like, oh, they're overstating the numbers, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, there's another metric to measure that isn't this person tested positive for COVID and died. It's at a commensurate time, like the previous year, the previous years, the average amount of people that died was X. And this year, the average amount of people that die is Y. And when that's consistently hundreds of people more, something is killing these people.
Right.
Now, we're going to get the government on figuring out what that thing is. But until we figure that out,
isolation because of lockdowns that America totally did. That's why the cure is worse than the disease, like Trump said.
They're dying from a broken heart.
Yep.
Great.
Which is, just an interesting way of phrasing like heart disease.
Dying from lack of freedom in Biden's communist America.
Did we give up on getting Zach your camera to work? I thought we had gotten that to work in the past.
It worked like one time, and then it hasn't ever worked since. So I don't know. I've clicked all the buttons, and none of them fix it. So
Yeah, it doesn't always work for me. I got mine, but it changes every time. It's just...
Yeah, Connor's like uncharacteristically bright today in his room. It's nice.
Yeah, I know. So it's 3:00 here, so it's not pitch black yet, and it is staying brighter for longer a little bit now. So
Nice.
It's this is what it looks like when there's sun out.
This is the first time I think I've ever realized what you look like.
Yeah, it seems like it really wasn't, but I mean, I look outside, I'm like, oh, okay, it's better than it was for sure.
Yeah.
So, guess it makes a difference pretty quick.
Needing some serious longer days because I'm hoping that we can finish recording by like 8 so that I can finish working on the project outside that I started. Because my choice is doing it in the dark and in the rain, or doing it when it's 30 degrees colder and also in the dark.
Oh, that's a tough choice.
45 degrees and raining is better than 15 degrees and not raining.
Fair enough.
You're making me look like a real lazy asshole because all I have to do is like walk downstairs into the garage to work on my project.
It's pretty nice.
I mean, I'm just parked out in front of the house, but I don't know. I didn't feel like driving over to my shop to do stuff, so I was just doing it at home and whatever. I'm not trying to make anybody look like a lazy asshole. I've talked to Connor. I've been manic as fuck for like a week and a half. Like, there was one night I came home from the bar at 1:30 in the morning and decided that was a good time to clean off my front porch, which has just been littered with car parts for 2 years. I was finished by 3.
Okay, so you actually finished. That's awesome. Good project.
Yeah,
Finished in the sense that there are now boxes of car parts that need carried over to the shop, but like there's no trash on the porch and the parts are boxed up and ready to move.
There you go. Sounds good to me.
I've been getting so much shit done.
Good. I mean, sometimes you need that. You need that like motivation to get it done. There's some positive benefits here, as opposed to negative benefits.
Oh, I've been fixing stuff in the house. Dumb little shit. Like, oh man, I almost forgot the effect that like depression has on your life where you just like have no motivation to do like anything. I'm just like, no, I'm just a lazy person. Like, yes, I'm depressed, but also I'm lazy. Now I'm just like, oh, now I feel really weird when I sit down for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I was going to say maybe it's the whole like shorter days or whatever, but I've been kind of depressed lately, and maybe that's why I've been getting nothing done. So
yeah, it's that time of the year. Like after the holidays, I feel like you just kind of gotta decompress a little bit.
Slump it up.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh, a thing that I have figured out that my biggest trigger that will send me into manic episodes is like stress and anxiety. And I spent a week and change with my mom. And when I came home, lunacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah.
Every time I like would stay with my parents for any length of time after I moved out at like 20, I was like, yeah, I remember why I fucking left. Like this is not like, because you get along so well with your parents when you're not there because you become like friends. You're just like texting like you're like you will literally have a drink with your parents and like talk like you're adults that are friends, and it's like, wow, this is like a whole different person that I get along with now. And then I don't know, like a week vacation or something. It's like, yeah, I remember why I fucking left. Bye.
Yeah.
Me and my mom did not vibe at all until I was like in my mid 30s. But then at some point we clicked, and now it's less that like she gets a little bit too much like my mom. It's more just that like everything about her life drives me insane. Like a good example is like if I'm just sitting at her house reading, she sees me reading and assumes I'm bored, so she starts talking to me.
Oh God.
Yeah. So if I am bored and I do a thing to remedy it, it gets just comes to a screeching halt. And then my mom has like really inane conversation with me. Like I saw a joke like this on Rick and Morty one time where it's just like, oh, what are you doing? Reading a book? And it's like, the fuck do you want me to say to that?
Yes, I know.
No, I'm just looking at it.
That's a great scene.
So what are you doing? Reading a book? Yes.
Nowhere to take that conversation. Oh, where are you going? The kitchen? Yeah, see? Doesn't feel so good.
My dad's favorite response to my very stupid question as a kid, which was, what are you doing? When it was very obvious what he was doing, whether it was like laying tile in the kitchen or folding laundry. Like, it's very obvious what you are doing, but I would still, as a 9-year-old, be like, what are you doing? And he would just always respond, planting corn. And then it made me realize how stupid of a question I had just asked. But I still would do it the next day. Like,
my mom is 65 years old and will see me making a sandwich and say, what are you doing?
Yeah. Tell you're planting corn.
And I don't consistently say the same thing, but I always just be like, oh, rebuilding an engine. You know, I'm cleaning the house. She does not pick up on these cues.
Did you, you want to get into car updates then? Because I actually have a car update myself, if you guys would like to hear it.
Wow, that's great.
Oh,
Yeah.
Before I forget, though, I did want to ask you guys from Cars and Comrades. I finished editing the first Bikes episode the other day, and I was wondering, there's a couple things I was going to cut. Maybe I should have had this conversation on Slack, but whatever. The part where I was a little bit racist towards Germans, I don't know if I should cut that out.
No, that's acceptable.
Okay. And then the part where
I'll weigh in on that too.
Where my ADD took over and I got distracted by Zach's letter opener.
Yeah, that doesn't need to be in there, I don't think. But
okay, I might.
I feel like that's more okay to take out than racism against Germans. I mean, they're not even a race. It's a nationality that, did some stuff.
Yeah, fuck those crowds.
Okay. That sounds good.
All right, well then.
Oh, Connor, that link that you have on the Slack for the notes, it's not working for me. It's saying access denied or something.
Yeah, I had a feeling that might happen.
Wait, is this more anti-German propaganda? Access denied?
You guys should all have access to a bunch of those other channels in the podcast tab on the left if you guys want to share any stuff in there.
That is a possibility. Let's see if I can figure that out.
Let me give you guys my car update in the meantime. I think the last thing I told you guys about my Toyota was that I just could not get it to start. And I had my father-in-law like smacking on the gas tank with a hammer, and that was sort of getting it to start. We were spraying starter fluid into the starter and all this shit, and none of it was working. And so I would love to tell you that I just put the spare key in it and it started right up. And then I didn't take it to a mechanic who then called me and asked me if I had a spare key and then charged me $65 to tell me that the spare key was actually the thing that it needed. But that's actually the latter is what happened, is that I took it to a fucking mechanic because I was totally out of my mind. I had no idea what to even begin to try to get this thing to start. Had it towed there. Luckily, my wife has AAA, so it was like that didn't cost anything. But then he looks at it for like a day, calls me and is like, do you have like a spare key? And I'm like, yeah, I'll bring it in. And tried that, immediately started up, and then I just drove it home. So, and that cost me $65.
So was the old one like worn out or something? Is that what happened?
Like it's like one of those Toyotas. I mean, depending on what year, it's a key fob with a key mixed in one. So it's just got like that big housing on the key that has like the 4 buttons on it. And so mine had broken, and it had been broken for like months. And it basically, I would just snap it back together. And then when you twisted the key to turn the car on or off, if you did that too hard, it would just break again. Then you have to put it back together. And so I bought a new one online, like on Amazon or something. And the way that works is that it gives you like a whole thing, and the key that is fastened in there is blank, and you have to get that carved. So I bring that to like the Home Depot, any place where they carve keys, and they're like, no, we can't touch that. We have no idea what to fucking do with that. I'm like, all right, well then I will just take the key part out of my old one and put it in this new housing and then the electronic part that has been opening up my car all the time.
Yep.
And then I will just seal that all together, and then that should turn on my car. Now it doesn't turn on my car, even though like all the electronic parts are there. And then even if I have, like, I don't know if there's some kind of microchip that I'm missing. I don't know what it is, but it's like I have it all there. But
Yep.
like, where's this microchip? You want to tell me?
It is, the key is programmed to the car. Yep. So you can't fuck around with that shit.
Guess who doesn't have these problems?
I'm still using the same key is the thing. Like I have the same.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Yep. It is communicating something with your computer. And so from your computer's perspective, someone's trying to steal your fucking car. They're like, whoa, hey, this key doesn't have the password, because keys have passwords now.
Yep. The key to my heart does not have a password.
I feel like I may not be explaining it properly, or there's some really mysterious part that I'm missing. But it's like,
Nope. This is a common thing. People get new keys all the time. You have to take it to a dealer for them to program the key. And if you don't fucking do that, you are fucked. It will not work. It is true of Toyota.
Are we talking about like the new ones that have like the chip key, that little like doodad that's in the like key itself?
Yeah, there's all sorts of different versions of it, but the truth is, keys, pretty much anything after 2010, which is just the cutoff in my head because that's to me a brand new car. So anything newer than 2010, you got fucking keys like that, and you got to go to the dealer to fuck around with them. I think even mine to some extent has some fuckery with it, and it's a 2003. I don't know what all the fuckery is, but like there's some shit like I can't just get the same. I don't know. There's all kinds of shit you got to program with these things. But when you disconnected those electronics from that key, that's what happened. So it's probably a lot like you can reset the computer in your car by unplugging your battery for, I don't know, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is. You unhook the battery for a while, it'll reset your computer. Not everything, but big parts of it. Like you can erase trouble codes sometimes doing that. So if you disconnected power from that fob for a while, then changed around keys and reassembled this and that, you lost whatever, password or whatever was attached to it. It didn't know what was going on. I mean, you have to understand your key is now a computer.
Yeah, I mean, it probably has like a RFID chip in there or something, right?
Yeah, it's something.
So, I mean, it's also possible that just the key itself has worn out and is not engaging all the pins in the tumbler or whatever it's called. But
Yeah, Mike,
know.
this is seriously a very common issue. Like, this is not, like, I'm not even fucking with you. This is just part of newer cars. It's capitalism. I mean, really, you cannot fuck with those keys unless you go to a dealer. No, they make sure of that. I don't know how they do it exactly, but you best believe you can't do fucking shit unless you go to the dealer with those keys. Totally common. Happens to so many fucking people, and they're all very confused when all of a sudden their car stops working.
Now's the part where I chime in and comment how for 2 years I removed the tumbler and just started my van with a screwdriver.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can pull the key out of my Ranger while it's running, and it just continues running. It's great.
Yeah. And the only electronics in my MR2 are the radio and the fuel injection. Everything else is mechanical. So...
Yeah, new keys, man. They're something else. I'm so glad I don't have to fuck with it, but if I ever do get like that new Nissan Z car, I'll be in for it.
I heard a story from a Lemons racer that I think they did like an arrive and drive thing. They, flew out to a race and got a rental car and drove to the track, and then, they were racing with a team that was local to the area. And I think it was a Nissan Altima or something that they rented. And they had to go into the nearest town to like go to an auto parts store and get a replacement part for their race car. And they had left the key fob on like a table next to the car where it was parked. And with it that close, they were able to get in the car and start it and drive it away. But then when they parked at the parts store, it wouldn't start again because the key was... 20 miles away or something.
Oh, no. Oh, my God.
I've always wondered about that.
Yeah.
Wow. because my mom has one of those like remote start doodads, and I'm like, what happens if it like falls out of my pocket like as I'm shutting the door?
It's fucking great.
Hard pass on all of that shit.
Yeah, innovation.
I grabbed my key, but there's nothing interesting about it. I was gonna like hold it up to you guys, but like I don't know if it actually would even explain anything. But like here's like the fob. You can see the Gorilla Glue hanging out of it where I attached the original key. It's just like all I changed in it was this plastic housing part. So I don't know. Maybe that's the problem. I'll get the. I think that's what it is. I think I actually changed this plastic part. So maybe there's something in this that I'm missing, and I got to use the original.
Doesn't work. Go to the
housing.
dealer.
I don't know. I'll try it out. But it's not.
They might sell you a new one, but
No, they. I mean, even the place where I took it, they said they have a guy who comes around every couple of days and he will replace keys, and he charges like $150 to do a new key, which is like I think $100 less than the dealership would charge, but he's able to match it up somehow. But it's like, why would I do that if I have like this key that just works? Like,
right there,
I'm fine.
you're questioning like capitalism. You're like, well, wait, why would I do this? Because money. What do you mean? That's why they want to make money off of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that a price to pay for the convenience of having the good key? Don't you want the good key? It's gooder than your key. You need it.
Oh, just the key that like unlocks my car and starts it. You know, I mean, the key that does what the fucking key is supposed to do. I have to pay $150 for that key, as opposed to having two different keys.
Yeah, no, that's somehow better.
I still want a fucking crate Jeep. Ever since when I was 19 and I was like working as a garage door installer, I heard about these crate Jeeps that you could buy left over from Vietnam for like $200 from like the back of an old like Army surplus magazine or something, and they would ship it to you, and you could just like put it together like you were in the field and then drive that thing around. I'm like, I have to find this thing. Like, before the internet was really even that big, like it was just gonna. Yeah, you cannot get these. Like, this is not a real thing that you can get for anybody. Like, sorry to disappoint you right out of the gate, but like, I looked into it, and like, the only way you can get one of those is at like an auction of Army surplus things, and then because it's considered like a weapon, I guess they cut it into fours with like a laser cutter, basically like diagonal. They just cut a big X in the entire thing, so you can have it as like a relic, but you cannot actually have like a fucking leftover Vietnam crate Jeep as much as you may like. Now, whether you can buy one like. Because you can also buy a Hummer for like $5,000. Like those exist. You can get like a fucking H1 Hummer for not that much money from like the Army surplus things. So maybe you can get one that's already put together if it gets released in the proper way. But like you can't just get like a fucking crate one as much as I would have liked. But I would rather drive that rather than this Toyota with the key bullshit. Is my point.
I've never heard any like whatever urban legends about like buying a flat pack Jeep like still in the packaging, but I've seen like videos of them putting them together in the field. They're really fucking cool. Like it's like a team of 8 people will throw one together in like an hour.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, awesome. I want to say they talked about this on Car Talk, like 10, 20 years ago. Whenever I was listening to them, and they were basically saying, yeah, I mean that did exist once upon a time, but like basically they were all sold by whatever, the 60s or something.
America might love excess, especially in the Vietnam War era, but like. They didn't exactly make a lifetime supply of flat pack Jeeps for whoever wanted one.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of like a couple years ago, there was when all those like bird scooters started showing up on sidewalks. A bunch of like local cities government would be like, this is just illegally parked. We're going to impound it and auction them off. And they would auction them for like $20 or whatever. And then you could go on, eBay or whatever and get the replacement part that turns it from, the scan your car, GPS, locked everything scooter to just a regular scooter that you can drive. And people would get like basically free, bird scooters that they could zip around with. But yeah, no, those they figured out the legislation, or the right people got bribed so that they don't get impounded anymore. I mean, you can still steal one off the sidewalk and do the same thing, but not legally.
Not legal advice. Brian, speaking of things that are ubiquitous but still hard to get, I did want to get since you posted what was that bicycle, the Flying Pigeon? You said they made like $500 million of in China, and I was like, oh, then it should be easy to get one. They should be like cheap and just everywhere, right? No. As cool as they look and as reliable as they would probably be, if you could find one, it's still like $500-$600 if you want to get one.
Yeah, that's basically what I found too. Yeah, like you can you can get them from Alibaba for like $40 each if you order like 1,000 of them. So I don't know that this will probably come up in the bicycles part 2 episode, but I kind of want to like start a side hustle, like buying these online and selling them. Like, just need to get like a storage unit to put them all in and hire a couple people to assemble them and, flip them for a couple $100.
Do you think you could get a return fairly quickly on that?
I was talking to my friend about this and he's like, yeah, but you can also just go to Walmart and buy a bike for $100. Like, what makes this 1950s technology Chinese bike better than this, 1990s technology, Chinese bicycle? Like, where's the market for it, for getting a single speed steel frame bike with shitty brakes,
I mean, how big is the hipster, like, what do they call them? Like the fixies, like the fixed gear bikes that they do one speed or whatever? Because I know that was a thing that people would make fun of, was like hipsters who drive one speed bikes. And how big is the community of people who want that, but then also are aficionados of China? You know what I mean? Because China's also not super popular in America right now, so that might be
the Chinese bikes are single speed, not fixed gear.
Yeah, so they still have a freewheel.
I have no idea what I'm talking about.
I mean, you could squirt some super glue in there and make it a fixed gear, but I don't know if people would want that.
I didn't even know the difference between those two, so my apologies to all the bike people.
On a fixed gear, you can't coast. The pedals are turning whenever the wheel's turning. On a freewheel, you can coast.
That sounds stupid. Why would you want a fixed gear at all then? Did I just figure out why they were making fun of hipsters? Like,
because they're more fun to ride. I really like riding fixed gear.
What's desirable about the pedals going all the time though, as opposed to being able to coast?
I mean, personal preference, I guess. Really, at the end of the day, I feel like it's a little bit easier to maintain momentum in certain scenarios. It's like aesthetically, it's a lot because the bike has a very clean look because there's like no gears, nothing on the handlebars. It's smart to run a front brake, but you don't even have to. You can balance on them without putting your feet down. So if you're in like tow cages or clips and you come to a red light, you can balance the bike really easily without taking your feet off. Yeah, I mean, like, it's not inherently better, but as a personal preference, like, they're really fun to ride.
Now that you mention it, I realized my first bicycle was a Panasonic, of all brands, fixed gear. I couldn't coast, like you said. Like, I had to always be pedaling. And I didn't realize it until you said that, but that was my first bicycle. And, like, yeah, I rode the thing a lot.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, Brandon just likes old technology that's worse for the aesthetics of it. That's why he has carburetors on everything.
Oh, friend, wait until we get to my update for today.
Oh my God. If you put fuel injection on something, I'm going to eat a shoe. I don't know.
Oh, I didn't move forward. I moved backwards.
Okay, never mind. Oh, no. Did you put a hand crank start on a motor or something?
We'll get there, buddy.
Okay. All right. I won't spoil anything.
Cool. Yep. All right. So Zach, you are up.
Right on. I got a lot to talk about. I'm not a big Christmas person in general, but people like to give gifts and stuff. So I was just like, hey, if you're gonna get me anything, I need car parts. So get me some gift cards to Grimspeed, which if you're not in like the Subaru scene, they're big Subaru aftermarket supplier. So everybody that got me anything just got me gift cards for there. So I was able to buy some nice new parts. I got I had an AEM cold air intake that I bought quite a while ago, and I was going to get a tune for that because you obviously have to tune your car if it's turbocharged and you put a cold air intake on it, it's going to change some things. So you got to get a tune. And I talked to the guy and I was like, yo, I might be getting a downpipe eventually. Are you going to charge me more or less or the same if I get a tune with a downpipe as well? And he's like, nah, it'll be the same for, both or just one. So you might want to wait. Cool. So I had the cold air intake, bought a downpipe, bought a boost control solenoid and a new turbo heat shield, just a few little goodies for the Subaru. And I got all those installed last week. And I've just been doing some street tuning for that for the past few days, which is fun and terrifying because you have to do third gear pulls on the road all the way out to Redline.
Yeah,
and there's other people on the road.
It's iffy. I remember when I was doing them at like this area where there's like the Cook County Forest Preserves, and there's a few like they're 50-mile-per-hour roads or whatever. So I was like, well, so I'm going to go where I can avoid the police the best. And it was like, but it's a wooded area, so it was a little bit sketchy.
Oh yeah.
And third gear pulls get you up to, pretty close to 100. So
Oh yeah. I was trying to look at the speedometer when I was doing one, and there was no way I was doing that. My eyes were stuck on the road, and my hands were glued to the wheel because I've been doing it just kind of in right after work. Like it's just the best time I could do it, so I could get a log sent to my tuner, and he could get me something sent back. So it's like 4:30 in the afternoon, and the only place near me that's even remotely open is like a highway on-ramp. So I have to just commit to where I'm going really slow behind a car on the on-ramp to give them some space. And then there's somebody behind me like, this fucking asshole going 20 on the on-ramp.
Yep.
And then just hang down at the back of another car and hope that I get to red line before I meet them during rush hour. So it's not like I can bounce out a lane or whatever because there's cars in those lanes too. So yeah, it's been a really good time doing that. It's not terrifying at all. But yeah, it's going pretty well so far. Starting to move up to higher boost tunes and things like that. So it's just getting scarier and scarier. But hey, the time between 2,500 RPM and red line is getting shorter and shorter. So technically, I think that makes it safer.
Yeah, sure.
Nice.
Yeah, that's been fun.
I was doing that same thing last year or the year before. Yeah, about 2 years ago. The only thing is I get off work at 1 a.m., so there's no one in front of me, so it was a lot easier. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have the same 5-speed and gear ratio as mine, but mine would get up to about 90 at redline. In third gear. So
yep, I think that's what I figured. I looked pretty quickly after letting off one time, and I was just under 90. So I figured I was like 90, maybe 92. Which doesn't sound insanely fast overall, but it's pretty fast on the street, and especially around other cars.
Yeah, when you're doing a pull, it's quick because you're starting at a low speed, and then you get up there pretty quick. So,
oh yeah,
yeah.
Also, just in general, if you're doing 90 at like 2,500 RPMs versus 90 at like $6,000,
yeah,
the butt dial is off the charts. It feels terrifying. But yeah, no, I've been doing that. It's been pretty fun. I didn't ask for like a crackle, pop tune, any of that dumb shit, but I have blown some flames out the back end a little unintentionally a couple times.
Nice.
So that was cool.
I did at first I didn't get the crackle tune, but then I had to go back and forth to the tuner and whatever. And I was like, I only have 5 maps, and one of them is they're like, well, we're not gonna charge you, we can add it. I was like, all right, fucking add it. Whatever, add it. I don't have anything else to, it's like the performance tune, the crackle tune, and then there's like a valet mode or some shit. And I was like, all right, well, whatever. They're like, doesn't cost you anything. I was like, okay, all right, I want some flames. Give me that. Give me the pops and flames and shit.
I mean, if you have the option for it, it's, it's nice. I would, not run it every single day because that's like, I mean, kind of a dick move. But hey, if you're like at a show or whatever and you just want to blow some flames, fuck yeah, that's tight.
Is that bad for your car to do that?
Terrible.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great.
It's really,
I didn't get the impression that it was. Like,
I would say on a naturally aspirated car, it's not all that bad. Really, you're just kind of harming the exhaust system, like towards the end of it.
And the cats,
but
maybe.
Yeah, maybe the cat. Well, but on a turbocharged car, you're really killing the life of that turbocharger. It's not going to be having a good time.
Yeah. So Zach, how many? What kind of boost are you running?
I haven't gotten to a max boost pull yet. We're just like slowly, going through, and I'm just doing pulls, when I can. So it's been a week or so of going back and forth. And, it's e-tuning, so he sometimes takes a day or two to get back to me. But right now, I'm like maybe 3 or 4 data logs into like the big third gear pulls, and I think my peak is right under 14 PSI. So I'm hoping to get probably, I think where I could get to safely would be like 17 and a half, maybe 18 PSI on a stock turbo, stock internals.
What is the stock boost again?
13.5.
Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah, I've got about 17 myself, and that's about when the stock injectors max out.
Yeah.
So we'll talk later. I might need to get the name of your tuner because I might be doing some mods to mine, like bigger fuel injectors in the future. So
yeah, he's been pretty good so far. Decent price, and he's fairly responsive. I've been messaging him at weird times and stuff, so I think that makes it a little more difficult. But yeah, we'll talk about it.
Cool. Yeah.
Welcome to Cars and Comrades, where we talk about. Oh yeah, I'll talk to you after the show about the tuner. Yeah.
It's not a podcast. Just imagine you walked in on a few car guys having a conversation about something, and one of them just really, really wants to talk about a specific subject that we'll eventually get around to talking about.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I've long abandoned the concept that we care about our listeners, that we're just like recording a conversation we're having.
Yeah, pretty much. We do this for ourselves, not you.
I fully believe that.
It feels like it.
Sometimes we have information.
Sometimes. So Zach, does that pretty much wrap you up there?
I think so. Yeah. I need to work on my truck, but I'm fucking lazy and I haven't. So no updates there.
Well, on that note, I will go. I've accomplished pretty much nothing. I can't remember where I was the last time we recorded, but I haven't done shit. My car runs shitty because there's something wrong with it. We don't know what still. So I bought a new mass airflow sensor, and I just have not put it on yet because I'm lazy. Haven't put it on yet, but it's gonna probably have to go back to the shop next weekend anyway. So still runs shitty. It's got a misfire, but gets me to work.
It's all that counts.
And then I don't want to talk about the Camaro. So
I was gonna say
that is officially very back burner status. Luckily, the shop that it's at, I'm friends with the guy, so he's not bugging me to get moving on it until we figure out the 350. I'm not gonna worry too much about the Camaro. It's a pain in my ass, and I'd really rather not find out what's wrong until I have more money. So that's all I got. I've been lazy and I haven't done much.
Oh, that one was easy.
Yeah. See?
So I think that's my turn then, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I haven't done a whole lot since we last talked. I forget exactly where I was previously, but as it stands now, I have the engine and transmission and everything bolted into the car with the mounts on there, and basically I just have to hook up everything else. Last time I was working on it, I took out some of the rear suspension to get the axles put into the transmission on one side and the hubs on the other. And not only could I not get it in the transmission because of what I was talking about previous, the little weird circlip is being stubborn, but now I can't get the rear suspension back together. So I got frustrated and rage quit on that last weekend. But in the meantime, I did get new shifter cables and some bushings for the shifter on the inside in the cabin. So I'm going to install that. And while I was in there, taking apart the rear suspension, I saw that the stock bushings are just totally shot.
Yup.
Kind of like that meme, Connor, that you posted of Prince Philip. That's what my bushings look like. So I'm going to replace those with poly bushings. I've got Rafi and James, their race car. They accidentally bought 2 sets of poly bushings for it. So I'm going to buy 1 set off of them and put that in eventually. But I'll probably get it on the road just so I can move it out of the way and work on my Subaru in the meantime. And
so regular bushings only have one partner, but then poly bushings are part of a whole polycule?
Yeah. You really don't want to look in the box while they're sitting there. You want to knock on there to let them know that you're opening it before you look inside.
Yeah.
But they're polyurethane, so they're going to be hopefully a little bit more durable and less crumbly than the stock rubber ones.
Oh no, I knew what they were. I just wanted to make that joke.
No, it was a good one. So yeah, and then the Subaru is leaking fuel, probably worse than it was, getting terrible mileage. So I really do need to fix that sooner rather than later. Oh, and something in the front end is going clunk when I go around corners. So I really need to just put it up in the air and see what's wrong. If I die because the wheel comes off at 90 miles an hour on the highway, that's why.
There was a clunking, and you drove on it. Yep. I'm very familiar with the feeling.
So yeah, fun stuff.
Sweet.
That's it. So Brandon, what do you got?
So you know how I'm really upfront about my mental health issues on the show?
Yeah.
Good news, everybody. I've taken a swing in the other direction, and now I barely sleep, and I have all of the energy in the world to accomplish everything. I've rearranged my house, started doing repairs, and so on New Year's Eve at around 4:30 in the afternoon, as the sun was beginning to set, I decided it was a good idea to do the water pump on my van.
Oh no.
Oh, no, there's no bad part to this story. In
Okay,
about 2
good.
hours, I had it 90% back together. Well, because my van had been leaking about a gallon of coolant every 2 days.
Yeah, I remember this.
And I was just topping it off every time I went to work. So I around like 7 o'clock, I realized that I was lacking about 2 pieces that I needed that I couldn't manage to salvage from the old water pump. And I was like, fuck it. I'll just walk over to the store tomorrow and grab new ones and whatever. And then at like 10 o'clock, my friend's like, hey, I'm having like me and my girlfriend are just fucking hanging out for New Year's, and you should come over and like watch a movie with us. And so at 11 o'clock at night, I decided, fuck it, I can get the old water pump apart. And I did. And by 11:30, I had it finished back together and was over at my friend's house. And then, did New Year's Eve stuff, and then came home at like 2 a.m. and like started rearranging furniture and cleaning stuff and patching walls and things. And yeah, so that was just the one thing. The other thing, so lately I've been really considering, like, because my van gets fucking 12 miles to a gallon. Like, it's very impractical in some respects. Not in all, mind you, because I'm never going to like buy an Accord and then like haul a motor with it or whatever. But
oh, by the way,
I've
you
been
can. You can. I know you think you can't. I hauled my own fucking transmission in my car. It's in the car right now. It did scratch pieces of my dash, and it was not great for the seats, but it did fit in my 2-seater car, and it got the job done.
The last time I did some shit like that, I had to haul a 455 with a turbo 400. The combination weighs at least like 800 or 900 pounds.
Yeah, okay. Might be tough on a cord.
Maybe a Accord wagon then.
There you go.
Where there's a will and a tarp, there's a way.
Yeah.
Tarp would have been a good idea for me.
Fold the tarp over at least like 2 or 3 times to get the thickness in there.
I've been entertaining the idea of buying something more modern and practical. I got my head in the space of like, what would I want? Because there's a couple of modern cars that I like, but like they're expensive and they're Dodge and they're still not practical. They just make like 800 horsepower. Yeah, I would like a Hellcat. Fuck it. I'm not going to pay Hellcat money for anything, but yeah, it would be cool. So I got thinking like, fuck it. Like, it's not cool or anything, but like I would just get a Prius.
Hell
Because like they get like 50 something miles to a gallon, and like from everything I've heard, like replacing the batteries is a headache, but it's not expensive like it once was, and so on and so forth. So anyway, I was on Instagram cruising, and a friend of mine had something listed for sale, and so I bought it. It's a 1974 Econoline.
Wait, what, buddy?
That's not a Prius.
No. See, what I did was I primed myself for buying something new, and then I found something I liked. I broke every one of my personal rules on this purchase, boys. I got a Ford. It does not have a V8. This is a straight 6 cylinders of raw power. Dude, it's got everything. Manual brakes, manual steering, 3 on the tree. Oh, it is great. I love it so much. I'm gonna drive it everywhere. It's a little bit of a nightmare to drive, but it is now the best conditioned thing that I own. It like needs one body panel either cleaned up or maybe patched. The interior is great. The motor is a fresh crate motor with less than 2,000 miles on it. I did break the exhaust driving home, but I almost had that fixed, and then I had to record a stupid podcast. That's why I've been laying in the rain all day.
Sorry, bro.
Yeah, I saw pictures of this truck or this van. I like it. I thought it was great.
It already has side pipes. It's the most expensive thing I've ever bought besides my house.
All right, I'm going to check this out. Is it on Instagram or what?
Yeah, dude.
Brandon, was this the one where you said something about van butts
Yeah.
in your story? Okay.
that green one's my new one.
I like it.
I'm going to change a little bit eventually, but like it's perfect the way it is. I love this fucking thing. 3 on the Tree is such an insane nightmare to drive, especially with manual steering. I fucking love it. No, none of my friends want to drive it at all. It rules.
Oh, that's great. I do like that the story went from, I was actually considering buying a Prius, and then I got another van.
I needed the story to be an accurate reflection of my thought process.
It's not, look, it is, so I do the same thing. I'm like, you know what? I'm finally going to buy a practical daily. I'm going to start really looking. And I have looked at Priuses too. I just don't like the interior setup that much. I'm like, I don't know. But I have considered Priuses and other practical vehicles. The problem is when I start my search, I start looking for the higher trim levels. And I'm like, oh, wait, if there's a faster version, I'm going to get that. And then I go, well, for the same money, I could, get like a faster car. So then I start looking at the faster car for the same money. And then I'm like, I'm right back to, I'm looking for, oh, you know what? If I had a daily 350Z, then I could just make this one my race car. And like, that would be great. And then my partner comes in, she's like, you're not getting another rear wheel drive sports car. Like, that's not a daily. And I'm like, well, but like, it can be
A daily if you drive it every day.
That's my argument. That's my argument, but it does not fly with her. So it's funny. I will always start with like, I'm going to find a practical daily. And then I'm looking at 370Zs and shit. And I'm just like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I will find my way. I will reason my way into looking for very unpractical dailies. It's a curse, really.
This is a body style that is like my holy grail. They're really hard to find because one way that they were assembled from the factory, they always rotted out at the frame.
They all did back then.
No, this was a very specific thing. If you added like bushings to the bolts that held the gearbox to the frame, it was good. But without those, it would trap water and rot the frame out like immediately. They remedied it with the next generation of vans, but they changed the body style, and I don't like that body style at all. All my friends have been giving me hell about buying a Ford, not because they're anti-Ford, but because I shit on Fords relentlessly. Which, in my defense, I bought a Ford and broke it on the way home. So, yeah, I've started day one of fix or repair daily.
You're the third person I know who has consistently shit on Fords and then driven a Ford. Like, my longest friend shit on Fords his entire life, got a Ford because his company that he, like, is set to inherit, like, all of a sudden made a deal with Ford as opposed to, like, Chevy his entire life, and now he drives a Ford F-150. That, like, it's like one of the newer ones that, like, turns itself off at every red light, and it's really annoying. But he's like, yeah, it's just like every other truck. I don't know why I shit on them all the time. Like, whatever, it's fine. I'm like, yeah, it's a
I would
like,
never
how
own
could
a
it be
new
any different?
Ford.
Like, why would it?
But I would also never own a new Chevy or a new Dodge or some shit like that. Like,
I gotta say,
I ain't got that kind of money.
I would own a new Mustang. I think they've
Get off
finally.
the show.
Ah!
What do you say?
I said get off the show.
I mean, yeah, if someone gave me a brand new Corvette, I would totally drive it. Like, those are pretty sweet.
Yeah, agreed.
I wouldn't buy
I
one.
put a couple of 100 miles on it for funsies, and then I would sell it so I had money to buy something I gave a fuck about.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm assuming here, but like, I like vans. I'm assuming that a Corvette is probably hell to sleep in the back of.
Yeah, probably.
I think I would put Pontiac Fiero badges on it though, just for fun.
But yeah, so now I own a Ford. It's not a V8. It's not even automatic. I shit on manuals because I don't like them, and here we are. I am going to change that though. I'm going to put a fucking overdrive auto in it, but. Yeah, it's like my dream van. And so a friend of mine, about 150 miles into the state, was like feeling out if anybody would want to buy it. And I messaged him like a few minutes later, like with a wall of questions. And after he answered them all, and I got a lot of answers I did like and didn't like, I was like, all right, I'll see you on Saturday.
Nice.
You should put a turbo on it.
I actually was reading about somebody who turbocharged a 300. But here's the thing, like the straight 6 300 that Ford made, it's not the be all end all of motors by any stretch. Like, it's not a powerhouse. Even if you do performance work besides like forced induction, you're still not going to even get 300 horsepower out of it. Here's what you will get out of a Ford straight 6 300. 300,000 miles.
That's the key.
Those motors were like kind of mediocre, but they were mediocre forever.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, basically any American Straight Six is going to be like that, right?
Any straight six ever, pretty much.
Yeah.
The 300 specifically has a reputation for being like a really good workhorse motor that never dies.
Yeah, but so does that like 4-liter straight six that the Jeeps used. Same kind of thing.
Yes, but that doesn't have enough liters.
Or the Chrysler Slant Six.
Oh, the Leaning Tower of Power that like everyone I know has ever had problems with. No, that does not have that reputation.
Yeah, other straight sixes, JZ motors, even BMW straight sixes are pretty reliable. There's something about that straight six. That straight six orientation is just smoother and less demanding on the motor.
Plus the main caps, like the basing on the rods, like there's a main cap for every
There's the Ford
rod.
Barra in Australia. Wish we could get those here.
Either way, it's a crate motor with less than 2,000 miles on it. So
fuck yeah.
Yeah, this thing was a win. Like in weird terms of practicality, it actually is a practical decision for me because it's in really good shape. It didn't need any work until I got a hold of it. That work is already almost finished because somebody used flex pipe on a small portion of the exhaust and it rotted. And on the drive home, it broke.
Flex pipes are shitty. Just get rid of them. Anytime you can, get rid of flex pipes.
Well, I'm replacing it with more flex pipe.
Boo. Dude,
I'm not happy about it, but I want to drive it tomorrow. God damn it!
Yeah, I got rid of mine, but mostly because I was scraping mine on speed bumps, and I just eat through them every time. So
I'm hoping in fall I'll replace the portion that I'm doing right now and the other portion that's on it with a properly like welded stainless exhaust system. But right now, good is good enough.
Yeah, I feel you. Well, on that note, I think that probably wraps up our car talk, right?
You guys all went? Everybody's good?
I think we're good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sweet. All right. So let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, we will dive right into our Walter Reuther story.
Sounds good, man.
All right.
Hell yeah. Right, guys, time to go cut a piece of flex pipe to length.
No, definitely not.
Just replace it with like. Is it a trite joke to say to do the Flex Seal thing and just say replace it with Flex Seal? Is that something you guys have already done?
That would probably be about as good.
Okay.
Flex pipe sucks. You do like carpentry work and stuff like that. Like the wiring that comes in the corrugated like housing. I forget what it's specifically called.
MC
corrugated housing. Well, like Romex, like electrical wiring.
Yeah, but it's got that like helical stuff that you need a special tool to cut.
Are you talking about like really complicated wires like coax or Ethernet or something? Like
no, it's just power wires. Like I see them run on like wall exteriors and stuff, but it's in like a metal housing.
Oh, that coil thing, that stuff. I don't know how you work with that, actually. Now I know what you're talking about. I did not know what you meant at first. Sorry.
Flex pipe is just that, but bigger.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go microwave some food. I'll be back.
I'll be right back.
All right. I'll see you guys in like 5 to 10.
Yep. Sounds good.
That's enough time for me to cut pipe. Mania is like being involuntarily on cocaine.
All right. Anybody back?
Was it? I think. Yeah, you had to have been the one who posted self-care is like browsing Craigslist for like before 1990 and under $5,000.
Yep.
So if you had like an extra, I don't know, like 5 to 10, what would you do to like buy some kind of like fun car or something? Like, because I know if I ask my friends, like the guys I've talked to who are car guys in my life, it'd be like, get a fucking Miata, like get a $5,000 Miata and just like go balls to the wall with it. I'm like, that's probably what I would. And I think I may, like, if I hang around with Phil enough, he'll probably convince me to buy a fucking Miata just to tool around in.
Look, I would talk you out of it. Like, they're cool and they're fun. Look, everyone's going to have a different opinion. Here's mine. The thing to get into for fun, it can be an expensive hobby, but, like, I think drifting is just so approachable, and you can just, you can go and have a fucking blast and put almost no modification into a car. Now, granted, modification helps, but, like, I drifted my 350Z bone stock for a good year or two. Then I started adding shit, but like it was fucking phenomenal. I had so much fun. And like with drag racing, it takes a lot of money to have this to go fast. And like it's weirdly competitive, and especially like when you're trying to set up races and people get like too weird and serious about it. Nobody's just there to have fun. Drifting
Yeah.
You can go pretty much wherever.
Except for Brandon with his van.
Well, wherever you go, when it comes to drifting, you can find a place around you that'll have drift days for $50-$100, and like you could just go shred some fucking tires, have some fun. Like, so as a hobby car, you really cannot go wrong with anything that is good for that. Although a lot of those cars are now pretty expensive. A Miata can do that, but they are more difficult to do that with. I do recommend the 350Z, and part of the reason is they are very reliable. And to me,
do you like Z cars?
Well, and so depending on how much you have to spend, you could even upgrade into 370Z territory. So like you can get one from like 2009, 2010. You could pick those up for 10 to 15. You know what I mean? And that VQ motor is just fucking solid. It'll last forever. And what I liked about my Z is that I could show up to the track, do no fucking work, and go fucking kill it. You know, it was all about driving skill at that point. I just had to learn. Everyone else,
But you do have to be careful if you have the money to buy one of those cars, because I have had it explained to me several times recently that if you have the money to buy something that you enjoy, you're a bad communist.
Also true. I mean, that's we're bougie as fuck.
Yep.
What can I say? Like,
yep. So you'll have to fight that off. I have had people be like, "Oh, you own a car, and so how could you?" And I'm like, "Shut the fuck up, please. Just shut the fuck up."
Yeah.
Not interested. We all have lives. We all got to work for a living. Some of us make decent money, whatever. Yeah. So, like, if you're looking for a fun car, 350, a 370, or anything, or an old, even 90s or early 2000s BMW, rear-wheel drive, something like that, because it's something with a manual and rear-wheel drive. And the reason I say that is because, yeah, you can usually go fast, right? So I can go fast in a straight line, sort of, but, like, it's slow compared to a drag car. Like, not even, but, like, it's still fun. The thing about I think drifting is like, one, you can do it on the street. You shouldn't, but like, you can do it on the street, right? So you can find a parking lot in town and you can go have some fucking fun with it. And that's tough to beat. The thing about like a Miata, I think they're kind of expensive to maintain at this point, and I think the prices are a little high. Like, I wouldn't buy a car right now for this, but but like in a good couple of years or something, I am a big fan of the Z cars. I think they hold up really well. They're very, very reliable.
Is that the car that was in that meme that I just happened to post the other day that you commented on? And I was like, I didn't even realize this was a desirable car. And then you were like, oh yeah, this thing is like the shit.
Oh no, that was so that was the competitor to Subaru WRX STIs. That was an Evo 8.
Okay.
I think it was an Evo 8.
Okay.
It was a crude drawing, Brandon. So like you wouldn't know, like, but like I could look at it, I was like, oh fuck, that's an Evo. That's why I was like, that it was. It's hard to explain. It was like a trolley problem, but like, oh, this is, you know, your country has like no money in public transportation or something. And I was like, well,
yeah, it was just a ton of cars. It was just a ton of this one car all packed together, just a ton of traffic, and it was like, yeah, you know, your country has a public transportation issue, and then Connor pipes in, he's like, yeah, but if it was that car, I mean, like,
I'll sit in traffic in an Evo 8, no problem.
I would just like to criticize everyone who told me I couldn't cut a piece of flex pipe on our brake.
Unbelievable. He did do it. I thought there was a real possibility you would do this and come back just to say you did.
Oh no, it's more like for the last week, sitting still for like minutes at a time is difficult. So when I sat here for like 45 minutes, I had to go do something. I've been asked numerous times in the last week if I am currently on cocaine. I was not. I don't do cocaine. Getting shit done.
All right. You guys want to get started with the Walter Reuther story?
Oh yeah, we're here for that.
Yeah. All right. I guess I'll just do an introduction, and then I'll just hand it right off to you, Connor. Just to be clear, this is part 6, correct?
Think so. Pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
Part 6 of our 3-part series on Walter Reuther.
I know, right?
I'm kind of hoping we can wrap it up because I'm kind of tired of Walter Reuther, honestly.
Me
Like,
too.
I hope that we can work together in the future. Like I did kind of throw away the idea of doing something on Russian tanks. And yeah, maybe we'll do that in the future, or maybe something else.
Dude, Russian tanks would be the I mean, that would be a T-34 episode would be fucking great, or a T-34 series. Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Oh, by the way, did you guys see the thing with those kids from the Jen Sedong subreddit? They visited Michael Prenti.
I heard something about this in Instagram comments somewhere. I was really bummed to hear about his current state.
So he's in like okay health, and he's like in his late 80s, but he's like, yeah, got very bad Alzheimer's and just cannot remember anything. But like, and is also very lonely because like he's just still a guy like anybody else, and who's going to come visit him unless they can talk to him about politics or whatever? It's like, which he cannot do. Like he just doesn't. He can't. That's really fucking depressing.
Yeah, that was a bummer to find out. I was like, oh, and then someone's like, yeah, he's not in the great state, and I was like, oh, shoot, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm gonna do a shot of Malort for Dr. Parenti.
I'll drink to that.
Yeah, we're talking labor history, so I gotta have my Malort. Whew.
Yeah, I think I was accidentally muted there, but Mike, I think that mission you're talking about, they'll give you the Sirhan brainwashing, and you can take care of business.
What's the Sirhan brainwashing?
The guy that killed Bobby Kennedy. There's a whole conspiracy theory behind him that he was like brainwashed by the CIA or something.
See, I want to do the base version of that. I want like. And I'm like 80, and like to like the local ICE/Amazon facility, and I just go.
You don't need to slash that. They'll be the same thing by then.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh my god, I can see the ad campaign already. They're like, oh, the Amazon is burning. Well, let's give it some ice. Ice now partnering with Amazon.
Oh my god.
Oh no,
Zach.
God damn it.
Uh,
Fuck, I quit.
Yeah, this was already a depressing topic, but man, we have really gone down the wrong direction here.
Yeah, I fucked something up somewhere along the way there. Sorry.
listen, this horrible shit just happens in my brain, so you gotta deal with it too. I'm not suffering alone.
Please hope that Elon Musk actually gets control of ICE so that it just runs terribly and fails constantly.
Robot parts or something.
Connor, if you could remind me, like, what started us off on this trail, like, to also bring us back to the track.
Which
but,
trail?
like, where did I?
I think we were talking about Joe Biden's dementia.
Oh, there you go.
That's what it was. Like, that is fucked up. Like, so I was just kind of saying that, like, I'm surprised that they've been able to keep it up. It's been a year of his presidency, and it seems like every time they get him on a really important kind of press junket or whatever, he is able to maintain more than he can usually. So it just, it makes me wonder, what are they giving him? Why are they giving it to the rest of us? That's the real big pharma hoax there. That's all.
Oh, I can't hear Mike at all. Mike,
Hey, Brandon.
try again,
Hey,
Mike.
Brandon. Yo, talking.
Okay, well, that's loud enough that I can at least make out your words.
All right. If you're all right with that, then.
Just turn on the subtitles. Sorry.
No, that's pretty good.
Can I go on another little tangent here?
Sure.
I might have brought this up before, but like when Lee Carter was running for office in Virginia, one of the like mailers that his opponent sent out was like, it was that classic picture of like Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, and and then they put Lee Carter's face, and then Lee Carter like retweeted a picture of this.
I came across some anarcho-Bidenist memes, and now I'm trying.
Inadvertently, sort of around.
I collectivized it.
Yes.
There you go.
But I don't remember having ever heard that for a long time and making jokes like that on the podcast. And now I'm coming across like anarcho-Bidenism and the anti-malarkey action.
Yeah, speaking of memes, which I shouldn't take us on any more tangents, but early on in our Instagram account when we had like no followers, I did put out a meme that was like all the heads of like communist revolutionaries. So it was like Marx, Engels, Lenin, Mao. And then I put them like over the top of a tandem drift line, which I thought was endlessly funny. But Yeah, it was a long time ago. It worked well. So a tandem drift line is where like you're drifting, but like you're drifting all next to each other. And so I put that over the top,
Oh,
like
okay.
it was connecting it to that.
Oh, okay.
But
I get it.
yeah,
I
that
like
was
that
a
more too now that I know what a tandem drift line is.
yes. It's how you have some fun. It's kind of scary and cool. It's a lot scarier if it's your daily driver that gets you to work. You just don't spin.
God, those communists are amazing.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Cars and Comrades podcast. I'm Mike, he, him. And tonight I am here with Brandon, he, him, Brian, he, him, Connor, he, him, and Zach, he, him. So, again, we're picking back up with our Walter Reuther discussion. And this is going to be part 6 of however many parts it's going to take us. We have given up on trying to determine the end point. It's just going to go on as long as it takes. But that's what
Congrats for
So,
anyone who made it this far. If you've seen this pop up on your feed and been like, okay, and you actually hit play, congrats. You did it.
I mean, I've had a good response from the comrades in the Discord, so it's not like we're just wanking to ourselves here. Like, somebody's enjoying it, at least. So,
I've talked to at least a couple of people who started listening to our show because they heard us recording with you guys. So that's pretty cool.
hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
One of them with Mike was actually the fellow that you put me in touch with because he is an IATSE comrade, and been talking to that dude a good bit. So,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
yeah,
That's nice.
cool,
Hey,
cool guy. I almost was able to link up with him when I was down in Georgia, but some tragic shit happened and I was not able to.
Still, though, that's good to hear.
Yeah, real life connections.
You guys will probably actually turn a few people into cars, unfortunately, which will be like a carbon footprint negative, but what are you going to do? No
Personal-
ethical consumption, right?
Yeah, personal carbon footprint is a lie made up by Pete. So fuck it.
Did you say by Pete Buttigieg?
yeah, PB.
All right, cool. Well, as I said, I will hand it off to you, Connor, and we can pick back up with the discussion. I don't know if you even need to give like a recap. I think if you just pick back up where you left off, we will probably ask enough questions as we tend to do. And then if there's any gaps left off, and of course, people can go and check out the previous episodes. Of course, I know you guys have been having some recent issues with your podcast feed, so everybody just got their episodes refreshed into the podcast feed. So yeah, check it out if you haven't already.
Yeah.
You have no excuse.
That was an adventure, I'll say. It took
Yeah.
me like about 8 hours of work to get all the archives put back on the new hosting. And yeah, they're a little out of order. So sorry about that.
Yeah.
No, we've been
We were assured that this would not happen, right? From our old hosting service, it was
definitely would.
supposed to be a smooth transition. And then the day they shut down, we had some fucking problems.
Yeah. So we're calling you out, Chris Hayes from Shout Engine. Not the MSNBC guy, the other guy.
But I mean, fuck that other guy too. Fuck them all.
And it was kind of funny when we switched to the new hosting. The first download that we had was from the DC area. So maybe the feds are watching us. I don't know.
I'd be honored, honestly. They're actually listening. That's great.
Yeah. So
Let's go.
We're on a list. The question is, are we on a list that they listen to the episodes, or are we on a list of like, that's a problem? Which one is it?
yeah. So if you're in the FBI and you're listening, quit your job, get a real job. I don't know what else.
Don't work for the
Female
PLA.
body inspector is not a real job, you asshole.
All right. Well, anyway, yeah. So our feed was screwy. Sorry about that, folks. But it should be back to normal-ish. So, anyway, so in previous episodes, I know it's been a couple episodes since I've done this, so I'm going to do it again real quick. Mentioning sort of these questions that I've kind of floated around while going through this study. I think there's a few that are relevant today, of course, as always. So I wanted to just run through those real quick because I think it has been a few episodes now. But once again, how should we think about the dynamic between getting power within the capitalist system and building movements outside the centers of power? Is having influence with presidents and politicians actually worth anything? That's going to be real relevant today. Real relevant. How should we think about political education for union membership? Is it better to have larger unions or kind of more radical members, or some mix in between?
We're going to talk about political education. Maybe we should also delve into political re-education.
Yeah.
Yes.
Something that will, in some fashion, be required at some point. Undoubtedly.
Brandon, who are you? Me?
I mean, I talked to enough conservatives. I'm like, oof. Something's going to have to be done there.
It's going to be a big old mess to clean up off that wall.
So what alternatives might exist to the kind of political engagement we saw from unions in the 20th century? A separate workers' party, refusal to engage in electoral politics entirely. What could be done in the 21st century, assuming unions regain some kind of power? And how should we think about the very real pressure placed on unions by the global capitalist system? Since capital can move abroad and workers can't, and competition is undeniably global between workers and businesses, unions seem to be in an ever weakening position by default. How should we address these realities in the future? So, like, kind of a perfect example of this is like Japanese car makers were non-union at the time. And when they started entering into the American market, really hurt UAW workers. I mean, just
Gung-ho.
really was, completely damaging. And I didn't look into it yet, but one of those questions would be like, maybe some international organizing efforts would have headed that problem off a lot fucking sooner. But anyway, something to think about. Then my last question here is, how should we think about legality in future labor struggles? If the game is rigged by the ruling class and lawmakers, can anything be actually gained by playing by their rules? What alternatives might exist, and what are the costs of abandoning past notions of legality? So anyway, I just want to list those up top because I know a lot of this stuff is going to be relevant for the labor struggles of the 21st century. And like, I'm too stupid to figure this stuff out. But like, maybe there's someone listening who is much smarter than myself, who can save us all. We're all depending on you.
It's a group effort.
So we'll be picking back up our story right at about the 1960s. So in our last episode, we talked a lot about Walter's rise after World War II and kind of what happened in the wake of the Taft-Hartley Act and the merger of AFL-CIO and all of that stuff. And Walter pretty much at that point made a decision about where to take the labor movement and how to get politically engaged and what that political engagement was going to look like. So the 1960s is pretty much where we see if that direction was correct and what we've gained by following that path. And, spoiler, not that much, but, it's important to look at. So first here, we're going to talk a little bit about Walter's involvement with specifically the Democratic Party, because that was like, we know that in the past, we've seen like some Democrats, not all, but some Democrats have felt beholden to labor in some way, shape, or form. So in some of those cases, it was important to have their support. They were in control of National Guard, or they could choose whether to enforce legal injunctions or not. And that kind of stuff did play a role at some point, but it wasn't because like there was engagement in electoral politics per se. It was more, it was a little bit different. The tables were turned in such a way that the Democrats wanted something from labor, and the labor didn't necessarily, they were in the stronger position. So there was some value there. That will not always be the case. And we can kind of see that today a lot. So after the passage of the Taft-Hartley Act, union activity became severely limited, as we previously discussed. And so unions began trying to influence mainstream politics more than they had in the past. They wanted to use this political power to improve the lives of working people and to help preserve their own existence. The natural choice at the time was to align themselves with the Democratic Party, where they had received some support in the 1930s and 40s. Walter had always been politically involved and very well connected because of his organizing. There was a time when some portion of Democrats were somewhat beholden to organized labor, so pursuing greater influence in this sphere seemed like a reasonable course of action, a sentiment shared by many in the labor movement at the time. There was obviously some shortcomings with the strategy, though. The main issue seemed to be an imbalance in the terms of this unwritten agreement. Getting more involved in politics took a few different forms. Walter wanted organized labor to be able to have influence over legislation and a mainstream platform to push their agenda. This included the opportunity to speak at congressional committee hearings to make their case when they could coordinate with their Democratic allies. So we've seen this, you can see this today. There's some subcommittee somewhere having some kind of, hearing on this or that thing. Sometimes it's meaningful, sometimes it's not. So we can see the right does this to great effect with like Benghazi hearings. They use those, They just use those to bring out their fucking allies to just pontificate about shit, and they change the narrative and they push public opinion in that way. At this time, Democrats could do the same thing. And that was one of the benefits that unions got was, okay, we'll work with the Democrats. They'll bring us in front of this congressional hearing. It feels very official and important, and there's cameras on us. We can now make our case to American people. Because if the bosses had their way, we would never hear from union leaders ever. So there was some real utility there. Any gains they could make for working class people through electoral politics would allow unions to negotiate from a stronger position. Right? So this is kind of the idea of like, as we get workers into a better position, they can ask for more, which, sometimes can make workers complacent, but sometimes if with the right kind of organizing behind it, you can still actually just negotiate from a stronger and stronger position. And that's obviously the goal. Now, in exchange for this influence and platform, the unions would organize to support Democratic political campaigns. They were also helping to fund Democrats. They did this using political action committees, or as we know them today, PACs. Obviously, there were some limits on campaign contributions, so the unions used PACs, just as PACs are used today, for political campaigns. And endorsements from union bosses like Walter were extremely valuable to Democratic politicians. Getting an endorsement from Walter could get 80% of UAW members to vote for a candidate, and that effect was multiplied for all the working people who heard the news. So it wasn't just about getting the votes for union membership. By this time, Walter is a national figure. He's a household name, which is weird because we don't hear about him today. But at this time,
Funny how that works.
yeah, so in some ways, Walter was ineffective, but in other ways, there's a reason he was erased from history. And it was all the good stuff he did, not the bad stuff.
At one point, he was also erased from the present.
Yeah. So part of it was Walter was a national figure, and so people actually really watched to see where his endorsements were going to go. If you were a friend of Walter, you were going to get votes from people in even unrelated unions or people who just respected unions or came from families where they had a lot of union workers, right? So that, and UAW members would convince their families and friends also to vote in interest of the union. This is back when unions had real fucking power, and that's how they used it. So for a Democrat to get Walter's endorsement, it was kind of a big fucking deal. So they were willing to, play ball and give Walter a few things that he wanted to get that kind of an endorsement. Now, this might be a good arrangement if there wasn't a fundamental imbalance between who could deliver on their promises. You see, there's nothing to stop the union from giving money or organizing get out the vote campaigns or giving endorsements. They have full ability to provide that. Democratic politicians, on the other hand, can't deliver so easily. They always have excuses, both genuine and artificial. There's no shortage of Republicans or bad polls or bad timing or complicated processes or delays on delays or the rest of the party not going along. Should sound pretty familiar.
Or some parliamentarian or whatever they call it now.
Correct.
Connor, you're being They're being too generous even with those excuses. Like they bargain before they even get to the table. Man. They just before they even get to the point of having to make those excuses, they just say this is unrealistic, and then they bargain it down before then. And then the Republicans reject it anyway.
This is a different time. So this is the time when they actually use those excuses. We're at a time where they don't even get to those excuses. They're just like, no, we're not even gonna fuck with that. Nah, come back with less. Then we'll talk. So yeah, it's gotten bad. It was bad then. It's worse now.
I mean, and so just with the brief kind of introduction that you've done so far, I think one of the big takeaways, if people are going to relate to this, just the dismantling of the Democratic Party over the last few decades, is that union membership was a major voting bloc for them that they could depend on and that they needed to make concessions for. And now, because so few people are in unions, that it's not something that you can count on. And it's this vicious cycle of unions dismantling, the Democratic Party losing a base, and working class people not getting anything ever.
I do want to say, because I feel like I'm the optimist on the show here in general, that 2021, I think I saw that it was the highest increase in union membership in the U.S. in like fucking decades. So keep it up, America.
Yeah, I mean, the fucking longest awaited pendulum swing ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, one of the things to keep in mind is just you can deal with electoral politics here and there. In limited ways. To get pro-union legislation might be a worthwhile thing. The problem is, what a lot of people don't fully understand is that there's just an imbalance between what people deliver, what unions can deliver, and what Democrats can deliver. Because Democrats always have these fucking excuses. So, like, there's always something stopping them. But, like, there's nothing to stop the UAW from pledging tens of thousands of dollars to a campaign. They can just do that. They write a check and it's done. It's not like there's some Republican banker who's like, I'm not going to cash that check unless you make a law for XYZ. So, like, there's on one side, you have people who can do what they promise very easily without any question. And then people who can not do that or choose not to and have excuses, whatever the case may be. That is a fundamental difference. And I don't think there's even some quote unquote leftists who don't get that today. And I don't think there's a lot of unions who get that today. And they didn't get it then. And that's kind of what led to unions not being a political force anymore. And I think that misunderstanding was essentially just an error in strategy. And that strategy was partially thought up by Walter. Yeah. So anyway, all these fucking reasons they've got. The point of that all being is there's always a reason that the Democrats did not need to deliver. The unions could always hold up their end of the bargain, but the Democrats could not. So through this process, the Democratic Party managed to completely flip the old paradigm. Instead of Democrats being beholden to labor, labor had instead become beholden to Democrats. By the time this problem presented itself, the unions had already made the investment. They tied themselves to the Democratic Party. They had convinced their members to go along with them, and it wasn't so easy to take it back. There was never any plan to withdraw their support if the Democrats didn't deliver. Maybe they were just fooled like most liberals are today. That's not too far-fetched. Or maybe they saw what had happened and couldn't change course. I don't know the answer, but we can see today that unions are now hopelessly beholden to Democrats and for literally nothing in return.
Yes.
Yeah, so pretty dark.
I want to sarcastically defend Democrats, and I can't even fucking think of a way to do it.
Yeah, and so I think it's important to understand that it's like there was some utility to maybe working within electoral politics. At certain times that may be necessary or possible, but if there's no plan to withdraw your support, or if there's no demands for actually getting shit done, you can have this effect where the unions had made the initial investment, they got all their members on board with it. How do you take that back? Oh, sorry.
It's actually a very good and long-standing argument for why you should participate in bourgeois elections. And it's very simply to prove the inefficacy of bourgeois elections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. It does. it does help to radicalize people. I will say that. So you can see how it's ineffective.
I was thinking earlier today that inevitably when people pressure me in 2024 to vote for Biden to prevent Trump getting reelected because he's also inevitably going to run again,
Yeah.
I'm just going to tell them I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils, which means I'm going to vote for the Green Party because they're less evil than whatever Joe Biden did for the last 4 years. So
Yep.
fuck off.
Yep.
I'm just going to point out that the sequel to Weekend at Bernie's sucked too.
Yeah.
I don't know if that joke lands. I think of, every time I think of the election of Biden, I think of Weekend at Bernie's because he's just obviously a walking corpse.
But you know what? I will say, like, I didn't think they were going to be able to sustain what, because I thought that, like, whatever drug they gave him for the debates to, like, really
Yeah, I remember that.
keep his, it's like, you can tell they're giving him some kind of stimulant because you can see him in, like, in normal interviews, like, when they haven't given it to him, and then they shock him with something. Like, I don't know if they inject it or what, but, like, they have something. And
Yeah.
that's the real fucking conspiracy. Like, if you're worried about what the cabal and the elites are doing, like, the fact that they have this thing that they can fix your grandpa for you and, like, make him remember who you are, and they're not giving it to you, that's the real 5G Bill Gates chip right there. Like, you want that chip. Like, give me that chip for when I get older. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. How long does he have till his brain just explodes? You know?
It'll never explode. It'll just start leaking out of his ears.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he made a deal with the devil or something, but like, I don't know. He was bad in the campaign. He was a lot worse. And now you can tell night and day. It's by the hour.
it was as soon as they put him up against Bernie.
Yeah,
As soon as
I
they put
remember
him
that.
up against Bernie, he was like golden. I was like, where has this Joe Biden been? And then when they put him, once they got rid of Bernie, then they gave it to him a couple more times to debate Trump, and he was coherent. He was like, all of a sudden he was Joe Biden from like 30 years ago. It's like just in an old body. And then he wins, and then they've been like tapering it off. They don't give him the dose that they gave him back then, for sure.
Yeah.
But you can tell they're still dosing him every time he gets in front of the camera for any kind of serious issue to tell us that he's doing nothing about COVID. Like they dose him up pretty
He's got to
good,
be
but-
coherent when he tells us he's not going to do shit.
Yeah, like, I had very low expectations of him, obviously,
I know.
but I am still astounded by how far he's fallen even from those.
It's amazing, and I really don't see too many liberals anymore. I see more conservative thought than I ever do from liberals. But when I catch it, and they're down with Joe Biden, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? How?
You know what's really funny is how meta this is going to be, because we are now recording episode 6. I'm just finishing up editing episode 4, and episode 4 is when Brandon tells us, he's like, "Oh, I got COVID." And he's like, everybody I know has COVID. Like, out of 12 people that I know who are at this place, 12 of them have COVID. 12 of them were vaccinated. And he's like, I don't know if this is a Delta, because that was still going on, because we recorded that in like fucking October or something. And so you basically were calling what happened over the next 3 months right then, because you were saying that, like, yeah, nobody's doing anything. Nobody cares. Nobody's approaching this as if it's a real crisis. And we're hitting like record numbers every day. And we're going into the winter, and it's going to get worse because we recorded it in like fucking fall. And then you just called everything that was going to happen over the holidays and has continued to, it's prescient, man. It's great.
It's almost like I'm using some sort of immortal science.
Who knew?
Yeah, or you've got the lathe of heaven over there. You know, please
Dude,
use
some
it for
of-
good.
Some of the people that I knew that got COVID the same time I did in October have COVID again.
Lovely.
Wow.
Fun stuff.
Which actually, you bring up a good point, because this series is going so long, and we've had a couple like somewhat longer breaks and stuff. We should probably mention we are currently recording. It's about mid-January-ish. It's after the holidays. So yeah, because I forget when we recorded all of these. Yeah, it's worth mentioning.
Yeah, today's the 9th. So
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I'll say that since this isn't going to come out for a few weeks, I'm just going to preemptively say, like, I'm glad that things aren't as bad now as they're going to be when this episode gets released.
Oh my god, that's so depressing.
Dude, I'll make a riskier prediction. I'll say that, like, at some point before the midterm, Biden is going to forgive a portion of student debt for Pell Grant recipients who open up a business in a low-income area and have a father named Keith or some bullshit. He will do something enough just in time for the midterms that, like, neoliberals can point to it. But, like, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say
Yeah,
that.
I think it's really interesting that they keep pushing back that like when people need to start payments again on student loans. And right now, the deadline for it resuming is May 1st. So May Day, I don't know. That might be an interesting thing to happen on that day. Yeah, we'll see.
You know, like what I think is interesting, and this is literally like, I'm not being sarcastic here. I don't understand how they don't understand that they're still not acting in their own best interest. It's metaphorically, they're pointing the gun at their foot and they just keep pulling the trigger and saying, I don't understand why this hurts so much.
Because, I mean, they're just so divorced from the working class, you know, like they're just all a bunch of PMCs, you know.
Even specifically from the perspective of a devout capitalist, how can you not understand that killing your workforce and limiting your ability to reproduce capital is not good?
They have always done this shit. They have always undermined themselves. But I have never but like they cannot help it. They will always undermine themselves because they don't have a choice. Like they're so focused on like short-term profits. Got to get these people back to work. Got to get them back to work. They got to make money for me. And you're like,
I have not been able to get off of the fact that China, and granted, every time I fucking have a conversation, people are like, well, obviously they're lying. And I'm like, cool, what are your metrics other than China bad? Fuck you.
Big cope.
Yeah, you know, big if true. No, but like what? China managed to prevent like even like a fraction of the deaths that we've had. They've saved so many people and had economic recovery. So how is the logical response to that not be like, oh well, maybe we should help people, instead of like, no, they're just fucking lying.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really something, and it's.
I mean, Brandon, like the reason that they are not doing it, the reason they're shooting themselves in the foot is because it is algorithmic at this point. Like you're saying, Connor, they really cannot help it. They have no choice but to just do whatever is best for profit because that's what's controlling everything.
But that's my specific argument. They're only doing what is quote unquote good for profit over a period of like months. If you work beyond like a 3-month mark, this is devastating.
Short term is the only thing that dominates everything. There is no short long term.
Yeah,
they cannot think beyond short term because that's not what capitalism is able to do at all. It's just, you know, whatever the shareholders demand, and that's what runs both the private sector and the public sector at this point. And that's why China is going to continue to win, because they're able to make like long-term plans and actually, you know,
capital has gone full carpe diem.
Yeah, it's
ridiculous. I mean, so
capital.
Here's the thing: capitalism has had some successes. Karl Marx pointed out what some of those are, but they've never actually been that good at making money. Like they always got some new scheme to like fucking squeeze, you know, pennies out of people. But at the end of the day, you're like, you can't fucking plan ahead for anything. And it's very apparent. And anyone who's had a job can see at their own workplace, like they're doing this stupid shit that like doesn't make sense. Like no matter where you work, everyone can point out like, yeah, they could make like 20% more money if they just didn't do this stupid ass thing that they choose to do, but they'll never fucking change it. And every company is like that. Every single one. There is room for massive improvement, and the market never seems to punish them. It's almost like markets don't work.
Blasphemy.
Yeah. But I mean, that's to me the reason you can see it in every company that, you know, every company I've ever worked for, I'm just like, this is fucking stupid. Like, how could you possibly be operating this way? Every single company, and they all do just fine.
Yeah.
That is the nature of capitalism. They cannot help themselves.
I mean, Connor, I don't know if you realize the universality of what you just said, though. Like, every single person listening to this has had a job, currently has a job in a company that seems like it is running on a skeleton crew, like it is running on, like, just by the skin of its teeth. And you're like, how the fuck is this happening? And considered, like, functional. And it continues to go on. And not only do that, but make tons of money. And, like, you will leave, and the person who comes in will be, like, enthusiastic. It's just how it all works. It's crazy. It's fucked up. Yeah. It's crazy. Sorry, Brian. I totally interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say, at my workplace, there's a lot of sunk cost fallacy going on as far as like planning stuff. You know, it's like, oh, we bought this, you know, machine that's $100,000. It doesn't work. we better keep pouring another $100,000 into it to make it work rather than replace it with something that actually works and is user friendly and doesn't fuck up all the time and doesn't need to be repaired and whatnot. So yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah. But like even that, you can go, it's literally a known logical fallacy. It's written out. People have written books on this shit, and yet they'll just keep doing it. They'll fall into the same trap every time.
Connor, are you telling me that capitalism doesn't operate by what is actually optimal and what like logic and science tells it should do, and it's actually dominated by just the whims and wills of the rich and the elites? Like, no way. Come on.
Capitalism is operating on the same principle that I use when I blow up the motor in a van that's already worth $1,000.
Oh, I suddenly became very familiar with the mindset. Okay, well, that's a great segue into Walter's involvement with John F. Kennedy.
Is he $1,000 van with a blonde motor?
I was going to say, please get us back on the rail.
Yes, that specifically brought us back. So, through the Reuther's involvement in politics, they came into contact with the Kennedy family on a not too infrequent basis. Given their largely shared vision for helping working class people, they were on the same side of many fights and developed pretty strong personal friendship. Walter was considered as a possible running mate for John F. Kennedy in 1960, actually, but there was a small issue with that. Walter's reputation as a socialist, and possible communist according to the right, and union organizer was seen as a problem. Why wouldn't it be? He spoke too clearly on class issues. He wasn't kind to capital. He was the boss's boy from the perspective of the communists, but he was a communist from the perspective of capital. This was already known, though. Walter didn't hide his socialist class agenda, so why wasn't Walter president of the United States? And the answer to that is J. Edgar Hoover, our favorite villain. We know that Hoover...
I thought you were going to say it was because he was Irish and they weren't technically white yet.
That may have been, some part of it, but probably not too much.
Sorry, I'm just imagining Walter Reuther as LBJ, like showing his dick to journalists and like getting drunk and driving his amphicar into a lake and all the shenanigans that he got up to back in the day.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, J. Edgar Hoover was always interested in Walter Reuther, and it was his personal mission to always stop Walter from achieving whatever he could. And he had a special trick up his sleeve. See, J. Edgar Hoover had a doctored letter that seemed to suggest that Walter and Victor were supportive of the Soviet Union when they spent time working in the Gorky plant in the early 30s. So remember, that was part of that, world trip they took, and they spent a couple years working in that plant in Russia where Walter got cold, and so therefore communism doesn't work. So during that time, they had written home on a fairly regular basis, and because the FBI was interested in all things socialist and communist, they got their hands on one of these letters. Of course, the law enforcement community has no interest in things like truth, so they doctored the letter. The original had been signed Carry On the Fight and signed Vic and Wall. The doctored version was signed Carry On the Fight for a Soviet America, signed Vic and Wall.
Based.
Which, would have been based. But of course, this was, a problem for someone who has political ambitions. And kind of what we had talked about in, I think it was the last episode, where Walter pointed out to Victor, who had exposed CIA bullshit in their Latin American AFL-CIO affiliated unions. And Walter pointed out to Victor that, hey, you're trying to mess with an organization that can forge any document to prove that we're liars. So he was very aware of what they could do. And in this case, the FBI had done pretty much exactly that.
Wait, what did it even mean back then? They had unlimited access to typewriter technology?
I mean, sure. I mean,
they just took the letter that was already written and added a few words. That's not some amazing forgery.
Oh, it's not, but it's good enough. I mean, it got the job done.
I think it's a combination of having access to all the peak technology available at any given era because you just are the government. But then also having the legitimacy of saying like, oh, here's the official letter, like whatever Walter Reuther himself provides is a fake. Like we're the government, like we know better.
Yeah, all they have to do is, and by this time, like the FBI was trusted. Law enforcement at this time was relatively trusted. I don't know why it should. I mean, at no point should it have been trusted, but it was because Americans are gullible and have been subjected to serious propaganda. And so, yeah, the FBI had a letter that maybe a lot of the people who saw this letter may not have even believed it, but their constituents might. Oh, and that's the problem with trying to engage with people who are up for election by ostensibly uncritical, uneducated people. What are you supposed to fucking do? So that forged letter had been floated around before. It had been sent to politicians that were involved with Walter to make sure they didn't want to get too involved. It prevented Walter from getting appointed to countless commissions and boards and various appointments. This doctored letter was very effective in limiting the levers of power that Walter actually had access to. So at that time, of course, after McCarthyism and everything, being a communist was a problem. So if the FBI had a letter that seemed to suggest that you were at any point in time a communist, that was it. You were done in politics. So wonderful world we live in.
It's like there was that guy that was oh shoot, I should probably know this, but before I talk, but there was someone that was going to be in Carter's administration, either as the vice president or somewhere in the cabinet, and he got eliminated from the running because he had either like smoked weed once or had been like under treatment for mental illness once. Like it was like 10 years before or whatever, and it's like, oh, this guy is not capable of leadership, we better get him the fuck out of here. Like,
note to self, do not get involved with Carter administration.
I think you're safe on that one.
Yeah, any little thing was a political problem or was perceived as a political problem. And I think that's an important distinction is like, I don't know, what if we had just been like, yo, yeah, I'm a communist. Fuck it, whatever, I'm a communist. Maybe if we weren't trying to apologize for our fucking beliefs all the time, we wouldn't be in such a predicament. Back to serious stuff now. So it's a little bit funny to think about, like the fact that letter is a big part of the reason that Walter Reuther was not the vice president of the United States. And spoiler, if you know what happened to Mr. John F. Kennedy, this is why Walter Reuther was not the president.
Wait, what happened?
Yeah.
He lived happily ever after.
Okay?
Everyone was good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure, in whatever his dying brain experienced was probably happily ever after. But I don't know.
I heard he's back in Dallas, trying to stop the steal and free the children.
No, that was his kid, apparently. For some reason, it's his kid.
Yeah, Elvis is there. Michael Jackson is there. They're all back. Bigfoot, too, I'm sure.
So it's funny to think about, but if Walter had been JFK's vice president, it's possible that it would have prevented the assassination of JFK, of course, because Walter would have been seen as a greater threat by anyone who wanted Kennedy dead. So, kind of funny to think about. Now, Kennedy turned to Walter for anything he could, though, that wouldn't create too many waves. So, for example, he asked Walter to look into right-wing infiltration into military and law enforcement. Sound familiar?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll never guess what they found. So, yeah, that was an issue back then. They looked into it, and yeah, still dealing with it today. No one took that.
They were like, no, it's not a problem. They just are the law enforcement. It's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, so Kennedy also actually sent Walter as part of a delegation to Cuba in 1961. He was there to negotiate a prisoner release after the failed Bay of Pigs invasion with Fidel Castro.
Lol owned.
Yeah. Now, of course, right-wing criticism of negotiating with an enemy nation kept them from making any real progress, though. So I didn't look into it much further than that. But yeah, he was tasked with going and negotiating with Fidel Castro and whatever. It didn't work. King negotiator over here, who was, by all accounts, a good negotiator, just didn't work. Also, along those notes, I didn't know where to put this in my notes, so I'm like just shoehorning it the fuck in right now. It's a little bit pre-Kennedy, but fuck it, whatever. In 1959, at the request of the United States Department of State, Reuther met with Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev to discuss, among other things, capitalism versus communism, organized labor, and U.S.-Russia relations. The meeting happened in San Francisco at the Mark Hopkins Hotel and was front-page international news. Later, when Khrushchev met with President Kennedy at the Vienna summit in 1961, he told Kennedy, "We hung the likes of Reuther in Russia in 1917. So while we have some wonderful things to say about Walter Reuther in some of the things he did accomplish, he was cringe.
Oh, I have some critiques.
Yeah, Brandon's got some critiques that we will be getting to hopefully shortly.
I mean, I've got some critiques of Khrushchev, but that's kind of off topic also.
Also fair.
Yeah.
Also fair. He deserves
Wait, if Khrushchev liked him, does that mean that like Stalin, or didn't like him, does that mean Stalin might have been down with him?
I don't highly doubt.
I doubt that.
Okay, so after JFK had his head blown off, Johnson quickly turned to Walter for quote-unquote help. And this request was answered by Walter. Walter had real influence with a president of the United States in Kennedy, and he didn't want to give that up, right? Why would he? This was the whole point of getting into bourgeois politics. All of the sacrifice, all of the holding back, it was to get into this position. He was in the room with the fucking president. Okay, this was the fucking dream for the labor movement. LBJ called Walter up pretty much as soon as he had been sworn in, and he begged Walter for his support, no matter what. And Walter was happy to oblige. So he signed on the metaphorical dotted line. But he must have misread the fine print. This was not a two-way street by any stretch of the imagination. Walter got to speak with LBJ often, but it was mostly just Johnson talking Walter into supporting just about everything he did. The decades of experience in massive negotiations, all worth nothing, it seems, when he wanted to negotiate anything with the president. This is kind of partially where that question I raised at the top, what is it all for? What is it worth to be in the room with a president of the United States if the president's going to talk you into like supporting bullshit? What was the point?
Yeah, and I think this is the part in part one where I called Walter Reuther a cuck or LBJ's bitch or something like that.
Yeah.
So
not inaccurate.
Yep.
So when LBJ wanted to escalate the ongoing Vietnam War with combat troops, he asked Walter for his crucial support. As LBJ explained, and you can hear recordings of this in that documentary, which we did link in the show notes, although I have discovered that even our current link is no longer free. So
I think I found it on archive.org. So
okay.
No, that was a different one. Never mind. I'll see if I can find a copy of it.
Yeah, it was on YouTube when we started this recording. Brothers on the Line. It's a movie worth watching, but not free anymore. I don't think, unless we can find.
I would say it might be on some streaming service for free, like maybe Canopy, like the library thing. I'll have to double check on that.
I checked yesterday. It's only on Amazon Prime for a few dollars. So I was very disappointed.
It almost feels like there should be some sort of theory about how capital tends to co-opt anti-capitalist things.
Nah.
Yeah.
I think I really want to go buy a Che Guevara t-shirt on Amazon right now.
That's based as fuck, bro.
No. Okay, anyway.
As long as it's made in China.
In that documentary and others, they pretty much all have this I don't know how they got it, but a recording of this fucking phone call between LBJ and Walter where he's like, asking him to support him in the Vietnam War, which was obviously super unpopular with the left and with working people at the time. And LBJ said, and I quote, "You know I ain't no goddamn fascist." And then he went on with blah, 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 blah,
Hey,
blah.
pause.
Yeah.
I don't think that the era that we're discussing was maybe any sort of utopia, but can we at least reminisce about a time when the president was actively against fascism?
Yeah, right. Jesus.
Well,
At least
so,
in word. I mean,
yeah.
like he would openly be like, "I'm not a goddamn fascist." What his actions did were,
Seriously.
that's another thing. But
Which the next
Completely valid. I long for even the lip service on the matter.
right,
And Connor, I mean, LBJ recorded every goddamn thing, like almost as much as Nixon. Like, there's a recording out there of him ordering new pants and like asking the tailor, like, like let out the ass a little bit because I got fat or something like that. Like there's all kinds of bullshit about him.
Speaking of Nixon, it didn't find a place in my notes, but Nixon, as early as 1960, was very wary of Walter Reuther. He did not like Walter, and he thought Walter was a huge threat, much more than any fucking Democratic politician. And there was some quote like, "Oh my God," when he was being considered for vice president, and had involvement with Kennedy. Nixon, even at the time in 1960, was like, it would be worse than anything the Soviet Union could ever do for a president of the United States to be beholden in any way to a political boss like Walter Reuther. So, as much as we have criticisms of Walter, he did scare the shit out of the right. So, he did some things right.
To be fair, Nixon was paranoid about everything,
Yes.
but he was maybe right about this one.
Yeah. So anyway, it was politically toxic, sort of, to have Walter in that kind of position. So like I said, didn't make it into my notes, but yeah, even Nixon did see that even at the time. But anyway, so he said, "I'm no goddamn fascist." And of course, the next line I wrote is, "Perhaps that was true, but the difference was negligible when it came to the war." Okay. So he asked for Walter's support specifically because he was so respected as a reliable progressive. If Walter supported the war effort, perhaps it was a just cause after all. Walter had been on the right side of most issues previously, from the public perspective at least. Okay. Not from ours necessarily or the communists in the Union, but from the public, he was pretty reliably progressive. So why would this be any different? Walter thought this would earn him some serious capital with the president as well. Now, that's a very valuable IOU to have, right? Hey, I supported you in this fucking horrific thing you wanted to do. It's time to pay up. Now, it might be a nice arrangement, and it might be valuable capital if it wasn't going to be paid in monopoly money. You see, the longer Walter remained loyal to LBJ's every whim, the more it would take to break with the president, the more he wanted to hold on to save face. It would be incredibly difficult for Walter, who thought he had done everything right and had steered the labor movement as a whole into this direction, to come to terms with the fact that he had been wrong, that he had made a mistake. How many movement leaders have been plagued by the same problem? Going along with what doesn't work just to save face. How many movement leaders, even Walter's family and closest allies, began to wonder what the hell Walter was waiting for? They knew he was trying to walk a tightrope, but for fuck's sake, come on. Walter seemed to know that he was on the wrong side too. He didn't know how to change course though. So this position was fucking toxic for him. But he had done it to earn some points with the president, which seems like a very important thing to do. If you can get a dedicated labor organizer like Walter to have the president's ear and to be owed something by that president, I mean, that should be worth something, right?
You'd think.
You would think. So it didn't work out. Walter pretty much stayed on through most of the war. It wasn't until the very end that he really did start to come out against the war. He had started kind of like softly being critical of it, But it wasn't until right before his death that he really said, hey, I'm going to be against this shit now. And that was when Nixon was already in the presidency. So like he never betrayed Lyndon B. Johnson. And like, that sucks. He was LBJ's bitch the whole fucking time. And like, I don't want to understate how much Walter was involved with the LBJ administration. Despite not having any official position within the administration, Walter spoke with LBJ weekly. Weekly. They talked all the fucking time. Walter was, to some extent, he was trying. I don't want to pretend that like Walter wasn't trying to do something, but like he wasn't effective at it. And I think LBJ knew this, and it seemed apparent that like he was perfectly willing to exploit the fact that Walter didn't really have an easy escape. Now, that's a lot of doom and gloom. It wasn't all bad. LBJ did pass some halfway decent legislation on a wide range of issues, most importantly on civil rights. But of course, that legislation came from public pressure more so than like Democrats. LBJ did get through some public spending programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and some education programs, all as part of his Great Society initiative. And it was like his New Deal, just not quite as good because we don't talk about it today so much. So this was like LBJ's Build Back Better plan, but it actually passed is the difference there.
Well, it's because he didn't have a gosh darn Joe Manchin come up the works.
They hadn't invented the parliamentarian yet.
Well, and so it's interesting. Things were just different back then. Just genuinely, things were different. So Johnson was trying to get related legislation through to address the crippling poverty in the U.S., which he called the War on Poverty. Most of us have all heard of that. Now, this is all decent stuff, which Walter likely had a lot of influence in, but probably would have happened with or without him. This legislation was kind of just needed for the time, and this was during a time when even Democrats were expected to actually fucking pass legislation, which is just something that seems impossible today. I mean, we haven't seen anything like that. But in the 60s, Democrats did have some expectation to pass something, even if it was lukewarm bullshit. Like, there was something that had to be done. So, yeah, a little bit of a different time. And this is a good time to point out how successful the U.S. was at addressing poverty. Sorry.
Wait,
yeah, that's the joke.
I thought you were serious for a second. Like,
no, that's the joke.
You got me.
That's
bro.
the joke. So I want to compare that to like socialist countries that have had programs addressing poverty, which people can be critical of past attempts to build socialism or present ones, whatever. When they address poverty, I mean, there's no fucking contest. This was the war on poverty. It happened in the mid 60s. What the fuck did it do? Nothing. Jack shit. Capitalism inherently relies on poverty. It has to create desperate people willing to work for bullshit. There's no way around that. So, yeah. I did want to just kind of take that little shot there at it, but like it is pretty stark how like a socialist country is like, hey, we have some poverty, we'd like to fix it, and then they like do, and then people are like, oh, it's so shitty there, and I'm like, I mean, they had a lot of success.
Here's a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan. Oh, look, we achieved all of those. Actually, we beat them a little bit. And then everybody in the West is like, but at what cost?
It's just like, we have homeless people here. I mean, come on. It's just so pathetic.
Well, even like the New Deal or the GI Bill, like didn't really help black people. No. I just finished reading Hammer and Hoe. And like all the Alabama communists were like, fuck the New Deal, fuck FDR, this is not working for us. Like,
yeah,
because it was just in control of local officials so much. And they were
okay,
racist
well,
as
if the New Deal wasn't trying to help poor rural black people, then who was?
The
answer is the Communist Party. You've read the same book I have.
Yeah, read Hammer and Hoe. It's a good book. Sorry, go ahead.
No, so, I mean, really, I'm just kind of trying to hit home the fact that Walter made a huge investment, and he led the whole labor movement in this direction. to get involved in this, and he got to the top. You can't get any higher than talking directly to the fucking president. And where did it get us? You know, some legislation that would have happened with or without him. You know, it's not a stellar record here. So the other thing that Walter comes up in a lot is in the fight for civil rights. So this is a pretty complex issue when it comes to Walter, and Brandon's going to have some things to say about that. So,
yeah, a little bit.
Good. I do want to say, you know, while we may have some serious critiques of him, he did do a lot. Okay, he was not like bad on this issue per se, or not too bad. I should clarify.
I want to preface my whole argument with one thing, which is I can criticize him now from the perspective of having learned a lot from a lot of the things that he did. If you believe in praxis, then you know that that's the way to go about it. He did the things that he did. A lot of them were bad and didn't even play out well with the left in his era. But there's a certain extent to where I recognize and respect the fact that you have to make the mistakes to learn from them.
Yeah, and he did try. I mean, there's no way to say that Walter didn't care and that he didn't try. He did both, very much. It just wasn't always correct. So Walter was always a strong crusader for the cause of civil rights and meaningful racial equality. This goes all the way back to his childhood, which we discussed, however, 8,000 episodes ago. Walter's support for black workers never wavered. However, his support wasn't always perfect. He didn't always see the full spectrum of thought within the civil rights movement and didn't seriously engage with criticism of his approach. But he was serious about fighting for racial equality. He marched with Martin Luther King in Selma, Birmingham, Montgomery, and Jackson. And when King and others were jailed in Birmingham, Alabama, and King authored his famous letter from the Birmingham jail, Reuther arranged $160,000 for the protesters' release. Objectively, a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he also helped organize and finance the March on Washington on August 28th, 1963, delivering remarks from the Lincoln Memorial shortly before King gave his historic I Have a Dream speech. He served on the board of directors for the NAACP, which feels kind of weird to me today, but it's a different time, different approach.
Yeah.
It was important to get white people in the movement at the time. Feels weird to me today, though. Definitely.
And, another thing I learned, or a couple things I learned from Hammer and Hoe is, like Bull Connor, who was, I think he was like chief of police in Montgomery during the civil rights period. He was also back in the 30s and 40s, like, fucking with communists. And yeah, like he had the same job for 30 years or whatever. So he was fucking with the civil rights movement for 30 years.
Of course.
And also, it's pretty funny to read the criticisms of the NAACP from the Alabama Communist Party. They're like, these are a bunch of like bourgeois, like ineffective assholes or whatever. So nice.
Dude, from that perspective, it's really interesting because that whole book, like the crux of it is that like what the NAACP had like a few hundred members in Alabama at the time, as to where the Communist Party had like 50,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably a reason for that.
But yeah, the reason for it is the NAACP cared about black business owners.
Yeah.
And the Communist Party cared a little bit about someone else.
Yeah.
Like they were trying to organize like sharecroppers unions and shit like that, like in the 30s.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So under Walter's leadership, the UAW donated $75,000 in 1954. So again, this is not entirely just the 60s. I want to be clear. It's not like he jumped on the bandwagon in the 60s. Walter was always putting resources to this, including in the like 1950s. He was not like late to the fight. So they donated $75,000 in 1954 to help underwrite the NAACP's efforts led by Thurgood Marshall before the Supreme Court in the landmark case of Brown v. Board of Education. According to King, Reuther sent letters to all his local unions in 1957 requesting members to attend and provide financial support to the prayer pilgrimage for freedom in Washington, D.C. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom was held in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, August 28, 1963. The protest sought to advocate for the civil and economic rights of African Americans. Reuther helped organize the march along with other civil rights leaders. Originally, the march was planned to take place outside the Capitol building, but Reuther, however, persuaded other organizers to move the march to the Lincoln Memorial. He believed the Lincoln Memorial would be a less threatening to Congress, which is a pretty lame-ass thing to consider, of course, and the occasion would be more appropriate underneath the gaze of Abraham Lincoln's statue. The committee, notably Rustin, who don't know who that is, but whatever, agreed to move the site on the condition that Reuther pay
Actually,
for...
we should touch on that.
What?
Yeah, let's touch on it.
Bayard Rustin, I don't know a ton about him, but I know a little bit, specifically because there's a biopic being filmed about him here in Pittsburgh right now.
Oh, really?
Oh, okay, cool.
And, you know, being an IATSE now, like, I have a lot of friends who are working on that show. And so he's actually, like, an interesting counterpart to Walter Reuther, because he was a civil rights leader who was, at the time, a socialist and a member of, like, the Socialist Party that later became the Social Democrats, blah, blah, blah. Really, like, milquetoast, like, I don't know everything there is about him. I've read some brief synopses. He kind of makes, like, MLK look far left. And now, not to say that MLK didn't have some pretty, like, rad leftist leanings, but this dude was a Zionist, like, which I don't really know enough about, like, the history of Zionism to know exactly how bad of a position that was in the 60s, but it wasn't great.
Yeah, I mean, so was Stalin briefly. So, I mean, we cut people a little bit of slack, but
yeah, like, I don't know. When I say I don't know the history well enough, like, when was, like, the first Intifada?
In the 40s.
Yeah, so none of us know. But, like, he was a big, like, civil rights leader for, like, gay rights and things like that. So, like, he had some good stuff. But he was, like, super anti-black nationalism, like, really, like.
He was kind of cringe.
Really, yeah, I like, none of his positions resonate well with me, but, like, I think he's extra interesting because they are making the biopic about him now, and I'm wondering to what extent that's just, like, another attempt at, like, putting up on a pedestal, like, a really center, like, middling civil rights leader.
100% that.
Like, and, you know, at the same time, like, a dude who's in 1963 is, like, advocating for equality for, like, people of color and, like, gay people and everything. Like, I'm not going to write them off wholesale, but, like,
yeah,
he was not the be all end all of civil rights leaders at the time. So I find it extra curious that now they're making a movie about him.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. I didn't.
Yeah, he does seem like a logical counterpart to Walter Reuther. Like, distinct anti-communist. Like,
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have a quick tangent. I just, as we were talking about this, I was thinking I really want to write an alternative history novel where Stalin invades Alabama in the 30s to bring about civil rights.
That actually would have been cool.
Because that was a sort of like, there was people in the Alabama Communist Party who were like, please, Stalin, invade us. Based. There's like, it's kind of like the people that are saying, like, please, Xi, send troops to America. I just thought that was funny, and I was thinking about it. So sorry.
All good. So I'm almost through here. So anyway, the committee agreed to move the site on the condition that Reuther pay for a $19,000 sound system so that everyone on the National Mall could hear the speakers and musicians. Reuther and the UAW financed bus transportation for 5,000 of its rank and file members, which is not a small number, providing the largest single contingent from any organization. The UAW also paid for and brought thousands of signs for marchers to carry. So, like, when you see videos and, like, documentaries about the civil rights era, Walter was there. And if you look up pictures...
Right next to Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot that he even had that whole...
Yeah, buddy.
I
Was
fucking
it
hate
him
liberals.
Was it him that claimed that he was like arrested with Nelson Mandela or something?
Yeah. Or no, he was arrested protesting Nelson Mandela's imprisonment or something. It's just like, no, you weren't, bud. No.
If anything, he was protesting Nelson Mandela's release.
You know, which again, tangent. For anyone who watches It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, there's an episode where Frank Reynolds like would tell stories to people, and they're just like, dude, you're just describing the plot to Rambo. Yeah, that's Rambo. Like you were confusing your life with John Rambo, and that's what Joe Biden does.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything we see today, not everything, but like a good chunk of what we see today, I hate to say it, you can thank Walter Reuther's decisions for. He tried his best, but it was not the right path, man. So when you see like old documentaries and stuff of civil rights movement and with Martin Luther King, Walter is in the background of a lot of those like famous pictures and videos. Like if you find out, like go ahead and go on Google, look at what Walter Reuther looks like, and you'll start to see him in all these pictures and shit. Like he, as much as like his approach wasn't always the best, he was there. He was there for all of it. And, you know, he did put a lot of this into motion. And of course, like you see the I Have a Dream speech and just think like 5,000 of the people there are from the UAW. I mean, that's not like a small thing, although there were a fuckload of people there, but it's a big deal. So he did galvanize people for this movement. So all this is to say that Walter was heavily involved in the movement from early on, and he put his money where his mouth was. He helped to bring white workers into the movement and got them to understand how important solidarity was to the interests of the whole working class. Like I said earlier, not everyone was entirely satisfied with Walter's approach. Walter was often very focused on trying to move the broader public opinion on civil rights, sometimes at the expense of racial inequality within his own unions. So that's going to be our cue for Brandon to kind of go into a little bit about the other side of Walter on civil rights and some of the criticism of him. So
I've basically been waiting for 3 months for this. Now give me a second, because my cat has decided that this is the exact time that he's going to love me the most.
Yep. I'll be right back.
That was a nice launch.
Okay. So I have a document prepared for this that I think that we're all going to enjoy pretty well. It is... Oh, actually, you know, I'm going to do a little bit of background because there's probably a lot of people who are listening to this that have not necessarily listened to our episodes on the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement. So in broad strokes, Mike, have we talked about this in this series yet? I can't even remember.
no, we have not.
Okay, well, be prepared to be fucking stoked on something.
Yeah.
The Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, for anyone not aware, and that's probably a lot of people because it was not something that's, I think, very well remembered, but it was started out as a subset of the UAW, and it was when some black members of the UAW got together and formed an overtly Marxist-Leninist sub-faction within the UAW. And this eventually, spread, there was the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, Ford Revolutionary. There's been a lot even that I think are going to be lost to the ages until someone gets motivated to really go through some old writings and compile some shit, because I have found evidence of Revolutionary Union movements in healthcare throughout different unions throughout the nation. It spread, but was never a significant thing in a lot of these places. But Drum and some of their the other Revolutionary Union movements, this started out in Detroit specifically, had a few hundred members at some points, and were doing reading groups and all of the typical legitimately leftist things that were going on in the 60s. And they specifically had some opinions about Walter Reuther because they were in the UAW. His actions and the things that he said directly impacted them. So they wrote an open letter to Walter Reuther. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's 4 pages long, but I'm going to read They're bullet points and like the first paragraph that really like we've gotten even in our criticisms, I feel like we've painted a largely positive picture of Walter Reuther as somebody who was like progressing labor and racial justice in a good direction. And I don't think that what I'm about to read invalidates that, but it does give the other side of that from the people that were actually on the shop floor doing the work and experiencing what it was like to be in the UAW at the time as a black person. They had 5 bullet points listed in the opening of the letter that they wanted to state as their specific goals. And that is 1, expose the UAW's racist practices. 2, expose UAW's sweetheart union practices. 3, expose totalitarian control of the UAW by the Reuther machine. 4, present a full list of demands for the redress of grievances. And 5, unite all black workers in the struggle to dispose of you and your benchmen and to win workers' control over the union and the shops.
Hell yeah.
And I'm gonna read this one paragraph real quick because I feel like it sums up what a lot of the letter just sort of expands upon. There's no doubt that the UAW is run by a gang of white racists led by yourself. After 30 years of struggle, the UAW still has an executive board that is 92% white dominated. The skilled trades are still virtually closed to blacks. The international reps are still 95% white, and the international staff is 90% white. Black workers are still the last hired, first fired, rarely promoted, and work at the hardest, dirtiest, noisiest, most dangerous jobs in the industry. Many local union leaders openly brag of their affiliations with the Ku Klux Klan, their support for George Wallace, and their contempt for anything black. With over 30 years of movement behind, the UAW has had plenty of time to eliminate racism within its own ranks, yet has chosen not to do so.
Yeah.
People did not universally love Walter Reuther. I'll cite the book Detroit, I Do Mind Dying as like a really great follow-up if you're interested in this, because it's to this date like the only definitive thing I can find on a lot of the Revolutionary Union movement and the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, which is what that later turned into. But yeah, like I'm of two minds on this in a certain respect, in the same way that like this is going to feel like a weird comparison, but bear with me for a moment. A lot of the division in the left on opinions on China is it pro-capitalist or is it using capitalism to venture further towards socialism?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the things that China does do not inherently benefit workers and at times are to the detriment of workers. And that's not me even necessarily making a massive criticism of China because I work 60 hours a week, so I don't have the room to criticize China for making them work 60 hours a week when they're actually a government that's doing positive things for their people, and I'm just doing it to make a bunch of people rich.
Yeah.
But there is an extent to where I wonder if Reuther thought that he was sacrificing the good of the individual workers to produce a larger societal shift. Like, oh, you'll get yours later, so on and so forth.
Yes.
But I kind of don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Because, well, he was working on gaining, like, I do in my heart think that he was trying to benefit people, but he prioritized getting on the national stage and advocating for civil rights leaders when he was ignoring the people he was actually supposed to be accountable to. He was out there marching with Martin Luther King Jr. while people in his own union were still fucking afraid of getting lynched at work.
Yeah.
So what fucking good was he doing? Like,
yeah. And so I kind of want to come in here a little bit. And this is what I talk about what I mean when I'm talking about, you know, what should union membership even look like? I mean, why the fuck would you have people who brag about being in the KKK working alongside black workers or at all? You know, why are we not educating union membership? Why are we not actually having some consequences for like, okay, look, you're going to do this shit. We're not going to protect you. You know, why are we protecting racists within our unions, which they do today? You know, and I understand what Walter was doing, and I can't take away the fact that he was marching with Martin Luther King. He put his money where his mouth was. He did do a lot of the right stuff. But when it came to his own fucking union, black workers were not being promoted. They were not being treated fairly. And it's like, how much could have changed if you had shown a fucking example of like, hey, this is what it looks like when you promote black workers. Here's what it looks like when black people are treated with fucking dignity. How much further would that have gone? How much more popular would Walter be if he had put not even all of his focus within his own union, which is obviously, I understand the idea that he was going for the big press. He was trying to deal with the issues in a big way. But like, if you can't also deal with the problems right under your fucking nose, I mean, what good is it? You know, what is it worth? And so these sorts of...
Okay, my Cars and Comrades people will remember this story from our drum episode, but as an example of how truly bad the conditions were in some of these factories, specifically for black people, there was an instance, and I believe it was 71 or 72, where a man came in. I can't remember if he had been fired or if he had just reached his boiling point. He came in to the shop and murdered his boss, a foreman, and was on his way to find a job setter when he was stopped. One person who he was looking for was the union steward, because he had made numerous complaints to the steward about racism in the shop and being targeted. And the steward had continued trying to help people. Like, I'd read a little bit about him. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he actually seemed like he was trying to do a good job and address these grievances. But when he would go to the bosses, they basically told him that if he wanted to keep his job, he was going to need to shut the fuck up. And so he was fearful for his job and had not taken some of the grievances that this man had expressed very seriously. I believe he ended up killing 2 or 3 people. When he went to trial, the lawyers that defended him were affiliates with Drum. They weren't on the shop floor, but one person had gotten involved with the League of Revolutionary Black Workers while he was in law school, and he helped on the defense for this man. And they were effectively able to argue that the conditions for black workers in these factories were so appalling, so bad, and so unbearable that you could not logically expect someone to be treated that way and there not be an instance like this. The man was acquitted. A fucking black man who came into a factory in 1970 and killed 3 white men was acquitted because they were able to prove that the working conditions were that bad for black people in that shop.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Jesus, dude.
So yeah, tell me, like, yes, Walter Reuther is out there advocating, and he, like, I will absolutely not question a lot of the work that he did very early on in his career. But, like, what good is the union leader that no longer knows what the shop floor looks like?
You jog my memory of something that happened in 2019 in Toledo, Ohio, where someone hung a noose near a black person's workstation.
I remember that.
And wrote "whites only" on a sign. So this kind of shit still happens, you know, in, I guess it was 2018, excuse me. So, yeah.
And so, you know, kind of just like, what is the point of organizing workers if these are the people you're organizing? Like, isn't it worth something to, like, be able to not represent some people? And I'm sure there's some legal questions with this, and I don't understand all of them. I'm sure I will at some point because we'll be doing this podcast for a little bit. But, you know, is it worth organizing these sorts of people without actually having any expectations for them changing their fucking behavior? I mean, like, how can you have union members who can't even treat each other with respect? I mean, like, how do you function that way? And so how do you work up the fucking nerve to be out in front of cameras, to be thinking you're the biggest, baddest fucking labor leader when your own union is, I mean, ineffectual? And the other thing is, Walter Reuther ran the UAW, as this letter even says, like a fucking dictatorship. So this is like, Walter thought that he was doing the right thing, that his approach was correct, right? He led the entire labor movement into this political sphere the way that he wanted. And, you know, it's like, he does all the leadership, but like, there wasn't dissent allowed. It was Walter's way or the highway. Now, he thought he was correct, and I think through our study, we can determine he meant well. He had the best of intentions, but he was not correct. You know, in many ways. In some ways, he was correct, but in many, many ways, he was not. And so, go ahead, Brandon.
Well, real quick, before I forget, because I don't know the best place to include this. In Detroit, I Do Mind Dying, I remember reading, and I cannot find it again for the life of me, but the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement was at the time actively complaining about the construction of a resort. The UAW was funding. This. Yeah, they were funding a resort. I started reading more about it after we recorded that episode. So their complaint was that effectively they were spending exorbitant amounts of money on constructing this resort that was going to be open to union members, which sounds super cool, except that it was going to be something like, if everyone in the union wanted to go, it was going to take like decades for all of them to get a chance to. So it very quickly became apparent that they were constructing a resort for leadership and higher ups and people with any sort of authority. Yeah. And that resort got built and remained open up until fairly recently. I think it was sold. I read about this and forgot some of the history, but it was the Black Lake Resort. And like, it's actually hard to find information on the construction of it. But yeah, there were specifically people who were like, hey, you're spending millions of dollars on constructing this, and we still are fearing for our lives at work. Like,
and so building off of that, maybe today is a little bit different, but at the time, and perhaps in the future, unions had fucking money. There was no shortage of fucking cash for the UAW. They could funnel money into civil rights activities, into political campaigns, into apparently building fucking resorts. So there was no shortage of money. So then the question becomes, what about the strike funds? How could this money have been spent differently to get gains for the workers, to actually get something more? How could this money have been used to hire, I don't know, industrial saboteurs? Or, funding people to just be spies for the union, or anything that would have been far fucking cheaper than building a goddamn resort. Just imagine if they had, instead of building a resort, got their workers enough money to afford to go away for a while and the fucking paid time off to do it. That's so much fucking easier. And so, once upon a time, unions had money, and they can do that again. And when they have money again, how should they be spending it? And I think that is something we're going to have to consider going forward. And it cannot look the same way it did in the UAW.
Me and my friends have been discussing that actually locally, just because we don't have a union hall. Our local has been so small that up until recently, like, a lot of things were not options for us. And now more and more people are asking questions about how the local money is being spent and why we don't even have a union hall, like why there are not really resources coming back. Because money from the union, like, I love the idea of them building a resort that all of the fucking members can go to, but that's stupid. It's no, like, your job as the union is to better the lives of workers, lobby the government for better labor law, fucking, even that's still like pretty fucking bourgeois, but like training centers, union halls, places to organize, like everything you can to give workers the tools to better themselves. And they built a fucking resort.
Yeah.
And if the communists were in charge, do you think they would have built a resort? At this point, my notes have now ended, and Brandon has gone through most of his thing, but for anyone who is interested, especially your guys' listeners who aren't necessarily into cars so much, we did do I think it was a 3-part series on the revolutionary union movements within Detroit and the auto plants. And that in and of itself is a long, complex story, a lot like this. And there's many facets to it. So if you want to learn more, there is more to it. But there was another side of Walter. So like, I can have some amount of praise for Walter. And I was trying, of course, I'm trying to present that nice side of it, knowing what Brandon's got kind of up his sleeve here. So, yeah.
Well, I can take a very hard line, like fucking tanky stance against this guy who did a lot of good for workers. But I think that the constructive thing to do is to look at his failures and successes. And as we've talked about, or at least alluded to throughout this series, is that I think the conclusion that I've come to, and Mike, you and I tend to agree on a lot of things, so I'm already pretty far into just arming and taking control of things, whatever.
Based.
Walter Reuther tried as hard as he possibly could, as hard as anyone possibly could, to work within the system to change it for the better.
On the reformist path, yeah.
On a reformist path. And what he showed us was that it's not going to work. Because to work within bourgeois politics, you have to make concessions to capital that you should not have to make. That you're going that they're going to ask you to make concessions that they do expect you to make. Why any union has ever made a concession to capital is fucking beyond me. Because the second you give that to them, you're never getting it back. So, he did 30 years worth of work so that everyone that I know is either working overtime or 2 jobs to pay the fucking bills. Where did he get us?
Yeah. And so I
do think that he was a good person doing his best, but he followed the wrong path. And we only know that because people like him followed that path. And now we can see reformism doesn't work.
Yeah.
At least not in the long term. It always gets eroded. I mean, any gains that he did have in his lifetime, even if they weren't even all that great in his lifetime, as soon as the neoliberal turn came in the 70s, all that got eroded. So,
yeah, I mean, I remember reading one time about like all of the policies from the New Deal and how long they lasted. And it was basically fully walked back within a few years. But it's still heralded as like this America being on the brink of socialism. Oh, FDR was the greatest socialist leader, America, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, fuck you. Like, they gave you just enough to shut you the fuck up. And then they took that back and then more.
Yeah.
And that's the moral of this fucking story is that anything that they give you, they're going to take back tenfold.
Yeah. And I think one of the other morals of the story is Walter was fundamentally, he was a good and decent person. And he literally risked his life for all of this. I mean, he was under threat from capitalists, the government. He was hounded by the FBI. And it was all in he was still pursuing a pretty reformist path. He did everything. He followed all of the rules, did everything right. And like, it still wasn't enough. And like, he had the best of intentions. Like, I don't want people to think he did not have good intentions. He absolutely had great intentions. And so he should be lauded for that because at the time, most people did not have similar intentions. But those intentions weren't enough.
You can be a milquetoast sock dem or a fucking tanky, and to the people in power, you're a communist.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. So you might as well be a tanky. At least they get shit done.
But then also to the people that you're serving, you could not be doing enough. Like Walter Reuther was simultaneously the hardcorest Soviet Unionist, like dedicated communist that loves Stalin, but also a fucking racist to his own union subordinates and everything. It's like, you can be both at the same time. My takeaway from this episode has been, and it seems like you guys keep reaffirming it, whether we get on a tangent talking about the steady decline of America and America being unable to conquer the algorithm of maximizing short-term profits over human life or anything as far as like the future existence of the country itself, or whether we're talking about Walter Reuther and his motivations and his personal feelings, whether he's actually personally a racist or whether he's just personally trying to do what he can and is just being stifled by literally people breaking into his house and trying to kill him and his family. So it's like we can sit here and hem and haw about his personal motivations because that's good content for our podcast and we should continue to do it for a few more episodes. But also, what the big takeaway from that should be that you should have leaders for your organizations, because that obviously is effective, because we can see he was able to do a lot of work in his time as a leader. But also, you should have complete transparency in those organizations, because if the people below Walter and Victor and everybody in this organization, if people below Reuther have been able to see why he made the decisions that he made, just like if he had been able to see 50 years in the future and see like concessions that he made to the people that he made them to, if he'd be able to see the table that's set for labor in the future, he obviously wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But then also at the time, the people below him probably would have seen him making those decisions and said, no, we know that that's going to not turn out well for us. So like the collective wisdom would have, I think, probably guided him in a path that is more conducive to what we would want to see today. You know what I mean? Like all the things that seem so hindsight 2020 for us probably would have been just as clear to them at the time. And so that's a reason for the transparency. But still, I don't want that to sound like an anarchist thing, like we need to have no hierarchies, because
hold on now. Hold on. Like, no hierarchy is great.
Chaz, we want the UAW, but we want like transparency. We want the not the Chaz. Like,
So actually, I gotta take a couple points that you said that I think are super important to harp on a little bit. And well said. And so I want to point out, I've had a little too much to drink. Damn it. I'm losing it. But
I'm on beer 5.
Okay. Well, you're, you know what? The Malort is what's getting me. But I know I've got a point here, so I'm just going to go ahead and plow right into it and hope I get it right. One of the things that we come across with the Walter Reuther story is that he thought he was correct, and so he ran the union with kind of an iron fist. He didn't have any transparency, and he didn't have the kind of democratic input from below that was necessary for him to run this union in an effective way. He thought he was doing it correct, but he wasn't. And so,
Connor, you just fucking nailed it.
oh, hell yeah! See, Malort for the win.
Well, let's hold back on that.
But so, like, by doing this, if you don't have transparency and if you don't have the kind of input from below, you will run astray, whether you mean to or not. Obviously, you don't mean to run astray. So in this case, like, Walter could have averted some of this by letting popular elections happen within the UAW. And this is really important news today. This is applicable today. The UAW recently had an election for changing their setup to one member, one vote. Now, to me, that's what a vote is. So I don't know what the fuck they had before. I'm going to be real honest with you. I don't know what they had before, but they had some.
I read about it, and it was more of a delegate system.
Yeah, it was a delegate system that was not even really much of a good delegate. It was like the Electoral College, but for a union. It was bullshit. And so this is the kind of system that Walter was using to maintain control, to create what the League of Revolutionary Black Workers called the Reuther machine.
We in our drum episode, we discussed instances where the Reuther machine intervened and got police involved because drum were trying to organize their own representation to get like voted into like union positions, and they shut down the union hall like to prevent these people from having meetings, from organizing. And there is a lot of suspicion, and this is like buried in the annals of history, that like some of those union elections were pretty dodgy in favor of Reuther-backed candidates.
Yeah.
It's too much of an attitude of, I know what's good for you, trust me.
And this is where my, I'm going to sneak in that little anarchist bit. This is why.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds like it's a really dig at us tankies.
But
there,
hold on. I think when it comes to communist states, which honestly, I'm fine with. I'm not the typical blah, 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 whatever, bullshit, it's a state. Well, whatever may be necessary, I'm fine with. But transparency in government, in unions, in our movements, transparency is fucking important. And so when you take like a Soviet Union that couldn't always be transparent, but sometimes I'm just like, I don't know, be fucking transparent. Like, if you are this fucking clear, the CIA can't run a psyop that you're not. If you're just like, no, we told our people what we're doing. We were super clear. If you do that and you provide the evidence, the CIA has nothing against you. If you're not like Walter, who gives a shit about, yeah, whatever, I went to the Soviet Union, wasn't so fucking bad. Call me a communist. I don't give a fuck. I'm going to get gains for the working people. That's hard to argue with. I mean, I'm going to do a car analogy right here. This is what happens when I am drinking the Malort. It's like committing to a drift, right? If you commit to something and you're going to do it right and you're going to be transparent, your enemies have no recourse. If you are upfront, clear, and you have intention, what the fuck are they going to do? If you actually commit, which if you don't commit, if you're drifting and you don't commit to a corner, you're going to crash, right? The thing you have to do is like, you have to hit the fucking gas when you think you're going to crash. You have to hit the gas, not the brake. Because if you hit the brake, you are going to crash. It's counterintuitive. It's sometimes when you are your most scared or when you feel like you have to cover something up or you can't give up power or you can't let, the bottom have a say in how your union's running. You have to understand that, no, the workers know best. You have to just go with it. You have to commit to your path and fucking go with it. And when you do that, it works better. So that's my little rough car analogy.
I like it. Makes sense. I don't know how to drift, but it seems like it makes sense. The way that I've seen people do it seems like it.
Yeah.
You can fuck it up very easily if you don't hit the gas confidently at the right time.
You can't be. So here's the thing. You can't be scared when you're drifting. Like, you have to just accept, like, you know what? I can crash and I'll be okay. And then you go for it. You have to go all out, because if you hold back, that's when you will crash. And I think the story of Walter Reuther is kind of exactly that story. If you don't go all in, if you are not committed to following the path all the way, you're gonna crash. If you're trying to please too many fucking people, you're holding back, you're going half-assed. Yeah, look at what's gonna happen. And so,
I think the counterpoint, though, to the extreme transparency and letting everybody know about every concession that you're making and the reason that you're making it, so that even if you are making some revisionist quote-unquote concession to whoever you're making it to, that way you can at least let the people below you know why you're doing it, and then they may or may not agree with you. I think then the problem you're running into, like, if I'm is then you're going to get canceled by your own people. If they say, like, look, you shouldn't make this concession, it's like, then what? Then does your organization then become completely doctrinaire, like, to the book, and then never makes any concessions and then gets nothing done? You know what I mean? And I feel like that's kind of the paradox that we're all in, is that if you're trying to organize anything, you kind of have to be so perfect that it always toes the line in every situation and survives all these pitfalls. And the ones that succeed and do that and accomplish the most you hear about, and all the ones that fall to the wayside, you do not. And that's kind of just the position we're in.
So I would say we can all take different positions on this, but I think if we had the answer to this, we'd have global communism right now. I think that's the problem. Yeah. I think that's exactly what you're hitting.
Yeah, it's not universal.
Yeah. But I mean, through this story, I think there's a lot to be learned. And, we're not here to condemn Walter Reuther as like this awful person. We're having laughs. We're calling him cringe, whatever. But like, Walter was kind of the perfect example of like, he did some things right, did some things wrong. He really did try his best. And like, we now have, because of his mistakes, we have something to learn from. And I propose that is a part of the reason that Walter has been erased from history. This is part of the reason that no one and the left knows who Walter Reuther is. Okay, there is so much to learn from his story, and the fact that, and like, I think that there is a real concern that we may learn from his story, and I think that's what leads to no one knowing who he is. And so I think that that's why this is an important story. And that's why we're on part 6 in a 2-part series.
Well, we're bad at getting to the point.
We're very bad at getting to the point. Well. So I think, I'm saying this now, I think it's only going to be 7 parts. I think we can finish it up in the next... I think...
You said that on part 3 too. So
yeah, I know.
If on part 3 he said he thinks it's only going to be 7 parts, then he was
no. He said he had one more.
Excuse me.
All right. Well, no, I mean, with that being said, let's wrap it up there. And thank you again, Connor. I mean, yeah, I really like as much as like I don't know, you guys may think that I'm just like blowing smoke up your ass, like saying that I'm fine with doing as many parts as this takes. Like I really am, especially because like you have done all the hard work of the show prep that goes into this. Because for people who don't make podcasts, you guys may not realize that there are two hard parts that go into podcasting. It is the editing afterwards, and it is the show prep beforehand. And
Yeah.
Connor has done half of that for me, so I'm more than happy to let you do the other half if you let me do the second half, because I'm a control freak about the second half, so that's fine with me.
Yeah,
Great.
there's a reason why we don't put out an episode every week. You know.
Yeah, we had to stop doing that because it got.
Yeah. I'm such a glutton for punishment. I decided to do 2 episodes a week, and then I've not held to it once in the entire like 6 to 8 months since we started the Patreon. And said we're
And
gonna
that's
have
pretty
a
much
second
of
episode,
Walter. And we're going to try and close it up with some takeaways, which we kind of did a little bit in this last bit here, but there's more. It's a long story. It's complicated. And I don't know, for anyone listening who may be in film school or something, just saying, this should be a movie someday. So,
Seriously.
fucking movie. Make it happen.
And
yeah.
and the
No.
one about Stalin invading Alabama. I want to see that movie too.
Yeah.
Brian, I did want to say, like, that's something I really wanted to go down a rabbit hole on, but I didn't want to for time's sake. But, like, if you ever want to maybe change the medium that you want to do, because I know you said you wanted to write it as, like, a short story or possibly a longer book, but, like, if you want to make that into, like, we could do, like, a role-playing game themed with that, and then make it into, like, a multi-episode podcast series, and we could, like, talk about Stalin invading Alabama and, you know, showing people that actually... you get more out of an economic system if your government actually works for you. Who knew? But
Yeah, that's an idea. I don't know.
That is quite
I
an
mean,
idea.
I don't know how that would work exactly, but I'm on board if we want to do that.
I do.
I mean, it's just something to like when I say I'm going to write a short story about something, that never happens. But then if
Yeah,
I say I'm
same.
going to write a podcast episode about it, it happens.
Okay.
And then if I can find a way to like make that like lively at the same time, that's just me. So I'm just transmogrifying my experience to you. So, but yeah,
Writing a
Put it
story
out
can be a lot, but if we write a D&D campaign, I'm just saying that could work. And it does work well for podcasts, in my experience.
yeah,
I have been enjoying the Chapo D&D thing where they're
exactly, yeah.
doing the weird.
I dislike
good
that,
job, Rick.
but I also understand why it's fun for them to do. So
Yeah.
I would do it.
Yeah,
There you go.
I mean, I don't talk about it much on this show because it's not relevant to any of the stuff. But I'm a tabletop gamer too, so like that's right up my alley.
Fair
I've
enough.
never done
I'm not
tabletop
even, but I
gaming,
would
so-
for the show.
Yeah, I've never done role playing, so it'd be interesting.
Sweet.
I have a 40K army that's either very respectable or very not respectable, depending on whether you're judging me or not.
Yeah, I think you and Sterling would get along well.
I just bought a 3D printer. I'll print up a little like Stalin figurine for my character.
Hell
Yeah, we can have Hosea Hudson and Bull Connor, and I forget who else was involved with that whole thing, but yeah.
Well, that's a very good potential idea in the future. On that note, I would like to plug some various things that I can happen to remember, which is our Instagram, which is Cars and Comrades podcast. And then we also have a backup, which is also very important to follow because, you know, Instagram is shitty sometimes. And I like to make fun of
Nah.
I like to make fun of conservatives at times, and so that can get kind of iffy. Sometimes my account gets real like, hey, I don't know if I can post or not. So our backup is Cars and Comrades Podcast 2. Very simple and nothing to it. You can also follow us at Twitter and Facebook, which at some point I'll start updating eventually, someday.
Yeah, I posted a couple things on there lately, but
Thank
yeah,
God. So much to keep up with. So yeah, we're on Instagram, Twitter, Hexbear, Reddit, and yeah, give us good reviews and stuff because that helps us, we think. So rate, subscribe, and yes, if you are interested in a story about Black revolutionary workers organizing in auto plants in Detroit, check out our 3-part series on the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement because it's a fucking story.
Yeah.
Quite a story.
And that movie that John produced, that is on the internetarchive.org. What was the name of the movie again? Finally Got the News?
Finally got the news. Yep.
Yeah, that's worth watching.
Yeah.
So that's all our plugs, I think.
I'll just do a couple real quick plugs for my podcast. Obviously, check out the Turn Leftist podcast if I haven't won over any of your listeners yet.
Oh,
And,
yeah, I forgot. You guys have a
for our
podcast.
individual... Yeah, you know. That you may or may not be on, but yeah, I mean, obviously subscribe to the Turn Leftist podcast to get other episodes sort of in the same vein as this one. But then for our individual hosts, you can check out the Twitter that Sterling runs. That's Twitter/Turn Leftist Pod. You can check out Ward's Instagram pages where he posts memes. Those are Millennial Leftist and Millennial Marxist, and he's also on Twitter at Ward Lawley. And then for Cosper, their Patreon is patreon.com/COSPER_. I don't have the Patreon subscribers pulled up at the moment, and I haven't updated that list in a while, so I'm going to have to skip that one for now. Then for everything else, check out the Linktree. You can get our t-shirts or become a Patreon at Linktree/TurnLeftist. And you can follow me on Instagram at TurnLeftist1917 since my backup account got banned.
That's right.
I went from having like 30K to 16, now I'm down to 2, baby. So yeah, well, I'm just going to build that back up slowly but surely. But the shit posting will always continue. So you just follow me on my current and my backup always. So yeah, just follow me on Turn Leftist. And for everything else, yeah, like I said, check out the Linktree. And that is it. All right, thank you, gentlemen. That was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, sorry I was getting bored.
I'm going to go reinstall my exhaust now.
Nice.
Have fun with that flex plate, buddy.
I might go install those shifter cables if it's not too cold in the garage.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and install
There you
some
go.
Bye,
tacos.
everybody.
Yeah,
Bye,
bye.
you gentlemen. See you next time.
I didn't know you had a Toyota.
I wish. I fucking wish. All
All right,
right,
later, guys.
bye.
We don't think you fight fire with fire fists, we think you fight fire with water fists. We gonna fight racism, not with racism, but we gonna fight with solidarity. We said we're not gonna fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we going to fight with socialism.
Amazingly, or not so amazingly, Cuba's crime rate is one of the lowest in the entire hemispheres. Oddly enough, it seems that when people have their basic human needs met, they're less likely to commit crimes.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
The free market mythology, it argues that the most ruthless, selfish, opportunistic, greedy, calculating plunderers, applying the most heartless measures in cold-blooded pursuit of corporate interest and wealth accumulation, will produce the best results for all of us. Through something called the invisible hand.
What are you smiling about? Dude, I almost had you.